Welcome, everyone. This is the School District of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. I'll call the meeting to order subject to Section 1983 of Wisconsin statutes. Our first item is adopt the agenda. Rick, is there any adjustments or changes need to be made?
There are no changes by administration.
We'll need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. And our next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Tanya, you want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item is recognition of visitors' public comment. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves in district matters. The rules: attendees should approach the podium one at a time and state their name, municipality, and residence, and the topic they'd like to address. A lot of time is maximum of 3 minutes per individual, and 6 minutes if that individual is representing a group. If you're representing a group, we'd like you to state the members of the group that are present. Participants shall direct all comments to the board and not to other staff or participants. The board will not act on any comments that are made during a meeting and do not relate directly to an agenda item for the meeting. And the presenting officer may also direct the district administration to follow up with that individual at a later date in a timely manner. And public comment, the public comment section will be limited to no more than 30 minutes unless board action is taken. So if you'd like to see the full public comment policy, it's policy 167.3 for a full description. Anybody at this time would like to approach the podium, please come forward. Anybody like to address the board?
Name Bailey Rona. Address is 310 Elm Street North, Prescott. Today I'm just here to address kind of the conversations that have been going on around the referendum and the estimates that have been going on. So I kind of want to start with a few things here. So things that I kind of found interesting, for those that don't know, I was on city council for 6 years. I don't think I've met any of these folks yet. So what I found kind of interesting was that on August 14th, we had a joint meeting, I believe, with the city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Rick?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we had a follow-up meeting, which was going to be a joint review board meeting. I believe that was October 8th. And then I believe there was another meeting. I set these out, that's okay, as I go through this, and I'll try and be quick. October 14th, this was going to be the city council meeting minutes. I believe you were in attendance, Rick, on this one, as far as I'm seeing on here on the roll call. I've never seen any of these people at any of my city council meetings while I was there for the last 6 years, so I don't know exactly what was taking place. I was not at the meeting, but we know that right now that our dollar amounts are quite a bit off from what we had estimated from what we had before. So I know we're working with, you guys work with Baird, we work with Ehlers. I don't anymore, but I did. And I just want to remind everybody, Ehlers, and I don't believe Baird is the same, but this is what's at the end of your finance advice that they give you. Did you guys read this? If you didn't, I would encourage you to. Because basically what it's saying is that incorporators providing this information to you for discussion purposes only. The information does not contemplate or relate to future issuance of municipal securities. Baird is not recommending that you take any action. And this information, they're basically identifying themselves. Okay, so I think there's a lot of questions. I don't know if everything has been answered here, and I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I think it's time that either, we need to start getting either the state involved, because there are some people that have some significant impacts to their taxes, so something needs to be made right. I think there's honestly Freedom of Information Acts that we need to file to understand what were the conversations that took place between Baird and the school board. Where was the disconnect, to at least have accountability in what happened? I mean, we're here now. But there has to be accountability to the taxpayers. There has to be. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I sat in a city council meeting where I got called all kinds of names for either the parking project, which, yes, that was mine. We went backwards on it, so because we listened to the public, but there has to be accountability in this, and that's what I'm asking for. And either I'll end up filing the Freedom of Information Act to ask for these records, because I think we just need to fix what happened. It cannot happen again. People can't afford it. People can't afford anything right now. So that's all I wanted to say. And Rick, it was nice meeting you. It's too bad we didn't meet in the 6 years that I was on city council. Enjoyed meetings, but it's nice to meet you now.
Thanks, Bailey. Anyone else?
My name is Lauren Hintz. I'm a resident of Diamond Bluff. I'm also a taxpayer to the school district of Prescott, Wisconsin. I attended the school district from 2001 to 2015 when I graduated. I always loved the school and the environment which the teachers and the staff made for us, and I was proud to be a student here. I am also a first lieutenant in the Wisconsin Army National Guard, and the one thing we pride ourselves in the Army is the integrity of ourselves, our soldiers, and our leadership. Today, I see a lack of integrity within the leadership of this district, which makes me very sad, actually, because considering I was a very proud student here. As a concerned taxpayer to the Prescott School District, I watched as the public was manipulated through the lack of transparency and negative financial actions by the superintendent of our school district, Dr. Rick Spicuzza. His negligence clearly defines his inability to perform financial duties by not being forthcoming about how taxpayers' money is allocated and by spreading misleading, inaccurate, and fraudulent information prior and after to the referendum passing. This misinformation was utilized as a tool to garner a yes vote for the referendum with the intention of benefiting the school system. The resulting tax implications were not adequately truthful or relate to the voters. This is a blatant violation of public trust and election laws. This fraudulent misconduct at the highest level.
I got to interrupt you, okay? Part of our policy, you cannot attack a personal, I know he's a superintendent and the board as well, but just the personal attacks, you gotta refrain from that. So if you have other comments you want to make, that's fine. But the personal attacks gotta stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
The misconduct at the highest level of our school administration has a direct impact on the lives of the hardworking taxpayers, including myself. Beyond the numerous Wisconsin government officials, I'm also requesting that the Wisconsin Department of Justice begin a complete investigation and audit the school's finances. I've contacted the Department of Justice as well as multiple other government entities regarding this matter. I also noticed that on the list of attendees for the November meeting, the school's financial consultants were not in attendance. Why weren't they present to back up the information? Isn't that what they're contracted to do? Why did they not address the inconsistencies in the data? They too should be held responsible for the negligent activities, and I'd be interested to hear from them today. The school board works for the taxpayer. And if the board does not discuss the negligence that happened during this referendum, during your closed session tonight, you are all a part of the problem. This toxic leadership level must end today.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Chris Dwoski, business teacher and from the town of St. Joseph. Last month, someone said that staff members are afraid to speak up for fear of retaliation. I agree. Trust and transparency are the foundations of any ethical organization, yet I and many staff members feel afraid to speak up. This must change. Now, I'm only speaking for myself, but I'm afraid to raise board-level concerns to the board.
Hey, Chris, I'm just gonna, I gotta pause here for a second. That's fine, you can say your piece, but just when you address yourself as an employee of the district, just know that you're subject to employee regulations, or repercussions from that, okay? So you're free to say what you want to say, but just, I want to just put a pause on it, just so you know. So you're free to speak whatever you want to say here.
That's fine. I'm coming personally, but I just want to identify as a district employee so that people know. Again, I'm only speaking for myself, but I'm here despite this fear because otherwise nothing will change. I have a great relationship with my administrators and trust them to discuss things within their domain, but I'm afraid of speaking to the board on district level high-level concerns for fear of disciplinary action for doing so because of what I know has happened in the past. And I'm afraid of giving specific examples because of this. It's difficult to build trust and raise concerns to the board when a board policy says that staff members have the freedom to speak but may be disciplined for doing so. While I understand this intention, it has a chilling effect and is a danger to any organization that wants to operate ethically. I believe a solution is having a teacher liaison to the school board to help raise concerns, offer perspective, and ensure a voice for all stakeholders. I'm also concerned with the board work session practices, specifically work sessions and special sessions. Suspending Robert's Rules of Order, that they're not filmed, and that minutes have not been posted online since 2018. What does the open meetings law say? Because I honestly don't know. And does this help to build trust and transparency? The community trusts us with your children, and I do not believe that this trust has been returned. I'm 34. I would like to have children and start a family. Our raises have not kept up with pace of inflation and are actually a decrease when accounting for actual purchasing power. I'm concerned that PSD does not reward loyalty. When I was hired, it was difficult to negotiate, and I was told that as a small district, we could not offer more. My salary is less than other staff members who have fewer qualifications and less experience. However, it is also the same as some staff close to retirement with decades of more experience. With pay scale adjustments and inflation, they've lost at least $8,000 of purchasing power over the last 9 years. Should I expect the same 20 years from now? How can I plan a family? These disparities do not build trust between staff and the district. They fray trust between and place staff in competition with each other, which ultimately disservices the students we serve. All teachers should be working together to collaborate, not compete against. It becomes difficult, if not impossible, when doing so means you could be the next person on the chopping block. In October, you promised about $800,000 for staff. You're considering a meager 1.5% increase for staff when we have continually outperformed others in the conference within the state, and our pay is already lagging. You advertised $6 per 100,000 to the community for the referendum, and I hear the community. The tax hike for communities outside the city could be hundreds or even thousands more. Something's broken. It places angry community members at odds with teaching staff for school board decisions, and it does little to help staff build trust with our students and families. And at the end of the day, the students are what matter most. I care about making a livable wage so that I can have a family of my own. I live in a community that I understand the tax impact because I also go through it. It's a rural community. I also care about the referendum and how it'll affect this community, including those who will struggle to afford the tax increases. In conclusion, I believe we as a district owe it to our community to see what we can do to cut costs for our residents by making smart and innovative decisions. We're Prescott. We are innovative. And residents say we spend a lot on private firms and consultants. I believe we have the collective experience and knowledge within our staff to offset many of these costs, to create better solutions because we are not external to our agency, and to strengthen programming across the board because of the unique things we could work together to achieve. I believe we, like universities, should consider a formal shared governance model between staff and district to avoid further staff attrition and to lessen the dependence on consultants, instead compensating participating staff. We are a unique school district. Reliance on consultants
Chris,
is
you're
not.
at 3. You're way over 3, but I got to you wrapping up here. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I gotta.
You cut me off at the beginning.
I know. I
pretty close to 3 minutes.
kind of account for it.
So I apologize.
I apologize.
I'm almost done. Can I finish?
Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you. If we are creative, if you believe in us as staff members, a shared governance model between staff and district would likely lead to wins for everyone involved, from students to teachers and the community as a whole, at less of a cost, with a greater investment from all involved, and with a much larger payoff to everyone. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Anyone else care to be recognized? All right. Let's move on. Go back to this one maybe. All right, Rick, good news.
Yeah, we'll start with our student rep.
The student leadership group went to Feed My Starving Children on December 11th and ended up packing 34,560 meals for those in need. The kickoff to winter break theme this week has included dress-up days and fun activities throughout the week at the high school. The Inclusivity Club has been selling candy kingrams, which are being delivered before break. Snowfest starts the week we get back from winter break, and it includes dress-up days, an assembly, and games throughout the week. And then on the sports sides, the girls' basketball team is currently 3-4, and the boys' basketball team is currently 6-1.
Thank you.
And Sandy Strand, our student services, will speak on behalf of our administrative team.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Spikuza. Tonight, I would like to share on behalf of my colleagues a couple of pieces of good news. First of all, the elementary school, Malone Elementary, has completed all of their training for Ames Web, which is the required screener that DPI has required all school districts to use per Act 20, and they are ready to take on screening and diagnostics come January per the new READ Act, Act 20. We obviously have some very talented high school students. We've had choir season, band season for concerts, and recently the middle school closed their production of Annie Jr., and just wanted to do a shout out to the cast, crew, and staff who made that musical come to life. And also wanted to just do a shout out to Allie Cornish. She also did all the costumes for Annie Jr., which looked beautiful on stage, but she also orchestrated a great, pun intended, band concert last night, and don't want to remind people to not miss the choir concert, should it still be on tomorrow night. Finally, for student services, I am pleased to announce that we are coming up on celebrating our 1-year anniversary of the collaboration with Northwest Journeys Day Treatment that is housed at our intermediate location. We currently have 12 students that are participating in the program, which is considered a full program at this juncture. A third of those students are students from Prescott, which is wonderful that they are able to serve our community first and foremost. We also have students from Hudson, Baldwin Woodville, New Richmond, and Ellsworth attending the program. So it is not only serving our school district, but our area as well. In our annual review meeting yesterday, both sides, myself and the Northwest Journeys folks, expressed how appreciative they were about our partnership, that they would like to potentially model a program like this in the La Crosse School District and model it after the partnership that they have here in Prescott, and looking forward to possibly expanding in the 26-27 school year. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy. From the superintendent. I just wanted to also, you saw our wonderful choir group that was here. We have a couple trips that are coming up that will be on the docket for later this evening. But we also had a one-act play that took place earlier, and we are proud to announce that A Murder of Crows, performed by our Prescott High School students, has been selected to go to nationals. This summer they'll be going to Indiana to represent the state of Wisconsin. Again, the small district that continues to perform stellar events. Our outstanding actor went to Zoe Anthony, outstanding actor to Cooper Langer. Abby Stubbe was outstanding actor. Thomas Speltz was the outstanding director. We won outstanding technical theater, outstanding ensemble, and the Critics' Choice Award. This is the second time that we have competed at the state level and continue to do remarkable things. Later in the spring, they will be performing once again as they get ready to keep their skills and their performance sharp. Secondly, I wanted to let everybody know to watch for an announcement later about weather. It's changing quickly, and we'll have that out to families ahead of time so you know whether or not we're on site or doing distance learning. And finally, I'd just like to wish our staff and our families and community a very happy holidays, however they celebrate, and look forward to starting the new year on January 6th.
All right, thanks, Rick. We're going to move on to school business. Our first item is consent agenda. In the consent, we have the November 20th regular board meeting minutes. We have finance reports, personnel report for non-licensed staff, the Prescott High School Alice drill, True Greens contract for the 3-year weed and feed, lawn green contract for the 3-year mowing, trimming, and perennial beds mulch. And finally, Malone 1.0 FTE position being fulfilled from .6 to .1, or 1.0 as approved in August 2024 for the second grade teacher. Anything in the consent that you would like to pull out, board? Anybody?
I do, just to be clear, we do have in there Weed and Feed with True Green. It is a 3-year. You did receive an email from a staff member. Wanted to make sure that you were aware that that staff member has spoken to you previously. I forwarded that to you as well as the response. The concern from that staff member has been whether or not we can reduce or limit some of the weeding solutions that are put on throughout the year at the different locations. This is something that Mike Hoyka has worked with the vendor multiple times. Sometimes there is miscommunication from our contract and the vendor down to the individuals that apply it. There is some discussion about, as you know, we have PCR athletics on the football fields, but there are things like the walkways or kind of the front parts of the school where students don't necessarily engage in sports but are close to the playground, whether or not we should be reducing that footprint. So I do want to let you know that those will be conveyed to True Green as we finalize, but happy to pull it out and discuss further if you need to.
All right. With that said, nothing has been taken out of the consent agenda, so I'm going to adopt the consent agenda. Any objections? No. Consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. We'll move on to item B, consider personnel reports for licensed staff. New hires?
Yes, we're very excited. We have an individual that has been offered a job and has already started teaching here at Prescott High School, a previous graduate of Prescott High School, Samantha, is it Bronlick? And she is enthusiastic, passionate, and we're happy to have her aboard. Resignations, Jenna Cadlick, PHS math teacher, submitted her resignation previously.
No retirements. Any questions from the board on this?
No questions.
All right. We'll look for a motion here.
I move to approve the personnel report for the licensed staff listed above.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That one carries. Item C is Prescott High School overnight Dorian choir trip.
Yes. Mr. Figge, on behalf of the choir department, will be coming forward. There are 2 proposals. They're back to back. Because they're overnight, we are bringing those forward to you.
Good evening. The first one is our Dorian choir trip. It's slated with approval for January 12th through the 14th. This is in Iowa. It allows some of our highest achieving vocal students to go down to Decorah and work with over 1,000 other high school vocalists from across the Midwest. It's really kind of the capstone of the choir experience because they get to work with college professors, students from across other states, and it helps them prepare for state honors too. For a lot of our kids, that's their next step in terms of competition and trying to figure out if they can take this to the post-secondary level.
Pat, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Tanya?
No questions.
Vicki?
None.
Ellen? No. None from you? Are you going? No. Okay. All right. We can take a motion here then.
I move to approve the Dorian choir trip.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. Item D is the overnight trip for the a cappella choir trip.
Yeah, so about a month later, you just heard our a cappella, our competitive a cappella does travel around. They've been invited to a number of different places over the past few years to compete. There's a nomination process for the ICHSA because it's select. They travel around the state. There's one competition per year. Only the best a cappella choirs from around the state are selected to actually attend and compete. For the second year in a row, our a cappella choir has been selected to come and compete. So this is February 14th through the 16th. It's in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. It's very similar to Dorian in that our kids then get to work with students from other districts, other vocal instructors, but in this case, we're competing as a group, and they do crown first, second, third, best emerging vocalist, things like that.
Anybody got any questions on this one? Comments?
No questions.
No questions, but this sounds pretty cool. Pretty cool that they were invited to do this, so, because they sounded awesome tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, they do.
Maybe just a quick note, whoever puts the summaries together for these trips, I really appreciate how they're done.
That would be Mrs. Camrath.
We have all the information, all the questions we normally ask, so appreciate anybody who's doing that. Thank you.
Pass that on.
Well done.
All right, we can entertain a motion here.
I move to approve the ICHSA a cappella choir trip.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That one also carries. Item E is consider moving a CD from BMO Harris Bank to PMA.
So Kara Klatt, our finance coordinator, is going to approach. As you know, we had a publicly posted work session that was on November 11th. We went through a host of priorities that the board had put forward prior to the election. We also talked about budgetary challenges and some headwinds, and also ways that we can generate additional revenue. Tonight, we're here to talk to you about Fund 46. It's a program where districts are able to put into a trust fund dollars so that they are directed specifically for capital purchases. This is what Mike Koika usually comes forward to you on an annual basis to give you a 10-year plan. Mike Koika was unable to join us tonight, but you know that he presented the 10-year plan last month and had promised to come back in January. We also will be adding things such as transportation fleet, buses, and large-scale technology so that we are putting away dollars on an annual basis to make sure that future costs can be handled within the district and not always having to go to operations or bond referendums. At this time, we currently have all of our money for Fund 46 for capital funds held at BMO Harris. We have 50% of our funds are in cash and 50% are in CDs. Kara has since joined us. We have 2 CDs and one is coming due on Friday. And so she started to look at both the interest that we're getting, both for our cash and with regards to the CD. And she would like to present with you an option. And you had asked her to follow up with BMO Harris because they're local, and she has some information for you. So what did you find out about our CDs, some rates, and what's the recommendation?
The highest that BMO is offering is a 6-month or 9-month CD for 3.778. They currently, the CD that we currently have that is going to renew was at 5.117. So the new rates, we started looking in the market. PMA can offer 6-month at 4.15, and then some varying rates for longer terms. They can also offer another option that we currently have some other funds held in, and it's a Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative, and yesterday's rate was 4.60. So if the CD funds were moved to a fund such as that, the rate fluctuates by day, but it's a cooperative, and there's counties invested, it's pooling. Counties, it would be counties, tech colleges, and school districts that are pooling their funds to get higher rate of return. That's liquid, it's not a CD, the term is not locked. The rates can fluctuate, they can increase, and they can decrease, so that's something to know. But the question, I guess, is to ask to move the CD, pull it out, reinvest at a higher rate.
With a different company.
With a different company. We're suggesting PMA.
Yeah, you currently hold all of your other bonds with PMA, which is a broker that works on your behalf to get the best rate.
Pat, do you have any questions on this one?
No questions. I mean, it's pretty logical, makes sense. Maybe with the co-op though, when you said, so there's, it's cash, it's liquid, right? So the rate is adjustable, but it can be liquid at any time. There's no early withdrawal or any type of penalties. It's 100% liquid.
100%.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
A question, we're moving just the one CD that's coming due, and then we're going to keep
The other CD.
the other stuff, yeah.
The other CD is held until June 5th.
Okay. And then do we have our cash flow with them as well, or anything else with them?
$27,000
Yeah.
in money market with them.
With them too, and we would keep that, maintain that with them for the time being, or would we be,
We would like permission to see if we can get a high-interest savings account with PMA. So one, that it's FDIC insured, but also getting a better rate than we currently are.
and that's that liquid one you were just talking about, you're thinking about that too?
That's $27,000 right now with BMO.
Okay. And is there a risk that it'll go much below the current rate that we have? It sounds like that it fluctuates. Yeah.
No.
You can't go
Okay.
lower.
Okay.
You
Okay.
can't go lower than what we're getting right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Vicki?
So the idea is to take this CD and have the funds available when we need them should a project arise that was either that we're planning for or that might be something all of a sudden we need to add into the budget, correct?
Correct.
For maintenance purposes. Okay.
Well, and we can only, the Fund 46, right, that's what this is? We have like a period of time that it has to stay invested in, and we kind of loop the money after a certain period of time. So this would be reinvested, held, and we would use the other money, right?
Yeah, and it can only be spent on the 10-year projects that are
Yeah.
listed on your 10-year plan.
So, yeah, the funds then, at this point, they would go in and they would just sit?
Yeah.
Okay.
And incur interest for now, and then we would decide to cash out or reinvest.
Okay.
Yeah, the Fund 46 dollars can only be spent at board discretion. So you'd have to approve any project to tap into that fund.
And that's what Mike figures out on his planning sheet for us, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else? We can come back to you.
It's a lot.
Helen?
Is there a cap on the rate fluctuation? So is there a cap on the rate fluctuation? Like it can only go up or down so much
The
each term?
most recent information I have is that, so what we're interested in getting approved today is to not renew the CD. So we can put the money in the money market, or at your discretion if you want to move. I don't have all the specifics 100%. I just received the last information this afternoon on the PMA cooperative funds. So I don't have all the details right at this point, but we do want to pull the CD, right, so that it doesn't renew.
Sure, yeah, by Friday.
And at a higher rate of interest.
So then having it in this fund gives us the ability to take, if it's in PMA or somewhere else with a savings account, that gives us the ability.
If you put it in the cooperative at the 4.6, and you see it starting to decline,
We could
you
pull.
could pull it, you could put it in, lock it in a CD.
Lock it into something else if we need to, but this gives us that ability to filter it into put it into Fund 46 if needed for upcoming projects, as long as we have it in a more liquid state versus a CD, because a CD, we have to wait till it matures.
The funds are already allocated to Fund 46. They're
Oh, okay.
They're currently
It's just how
designated
they're,
in a CD.
it's just how they're held. Okay.
Correct.
They're
Okay.
held in a CD.
Okay.
So ultimately, what you have is you have two CDs, one's coming due on Friday, and you either automatically renew it. Or put it into, and we are asking to put it into a high interest with PMA.
Okay.
Two CDs that make up the entire Fund 46 balance, is that what's in there?
No, we also have cash.
In cash? So two CDs make up about 50% of the Fund 46, and then the other 50 is cash?
Correct. And so what we want to do is, the next CD will come due in June, and so we would like to kind of move this first one, and then what we're looking at is with PMA, if we can get a high interest. And so we were only able to work on the CD part, and now we'll go and come back to you about the cash part.
Okay, I think I get it. the risk, is one thing that obviously is something, it sounds like it's low risk, but is that fair statement? I'm just, with being in a money market, it does fluctuate. We're not concerned with that.
But we don't necessarily have to place it in that money market. I guess the urgency at this point is to decide if we so let that CD renew.
Right.
And you could.
So we have options.
There's other options that higher than 4%.
I think that's fair.
We could lock another CD.
Okay. I'm good with it. Anybody else have any comments or questions right now?
No.
All right. Thanks, Kara. Anybody want to make a motion?
Maybe just a couple comments, quick on a motion. We want to potentially approve to move the CD, but we don't really, it doesn't sound like we're ready to approve as to where that goes yet. Is that fair?
So we're just not renewing the CD, is what we're doing?
Well, that's what it sounds like.
We're moving it to PMA.
We're moving it to PMA.
We want to move it into PMA for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the liquid stuff we're not sure about yet.
We're trying to yes. So we want to move, we have 250,000 in this CD. This CD is sunsetting on Friday. It either goes into cash, which is getting less than 1%, or you can get another CD and lock it up, but you'll get 3%, which is not a good rate at this time. So what we did is shopped around. PMA can give us either a money market at 4% or CDs that are above 4.5, and we're kind of looking at which option is best for us.
So that would be our motion, is to put it, approve to have it moved to PMA at district's discretion, district administrator's discretion as to where it moves within PMA, right? That's what we're...
That's what we're asking, yes.
Yep. All right.
And we'll be back in June with the other CD, which is about 250 days a month.
Any other questions? Do we want to make a motion here?
I move to approve moving a CD from BMO Harris Bank to PMA.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Nice work, Kara. Thank you.
Kara gets to stay again.
The next one is item F, Clifton Larson Allen audit.
So on an annual basis, school districts across the state are required to conduct an audit. We use Clifton Larson Allen. They must submit it by no later than December to DPI. That audit has come into you, and basically solid performance as well, checks and balances. I've asked Kara to just kind of walk you through some of the things with around the executive summary. Typically, you want to look at the fund balance, what it was projected based on some of the cost savings steps that were made throughout the year, where that was finalized, and then also areas for improvement. And so she'll walk you through 3 key points.
So some of the things that I highlighted here in the executive summary, and it will be somewhat brief. If there's further question, I'm available to answer any questions for all of you, because I think that when you get into this, there's a lot of information, basically over 90 pages just with the audit itself, right? And so these are all numbers that are reviewed by them. One that I highlight on one of the first pages of report on compliance is based on Clifton Larson Allen's review of the school finances. They state, in our opinion, the district complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements referred to by federal and state programs. Also, they review the general accounting practices, and those were all in compliance. When I move to page 77, that's probably different than what Rick has up here on the screen. Just some things I wanted to highlight. The audit did not disclose any matters required to be reported in accordance with major federal programs. So that means they didn't find any material issues with the findings of the audit. The audit did not disclose any matters required to be reported in accordance with the state single audit guidelines issued by the Wisconsin Department of Administration, and the audit did not disclose any matters required to be reported in accordance with Wisconsin Public School District Manual. And then I highlighted some items here on it's the general fund budgetary comparison schedule, which it highlights at the bottom of that would be on page 49 of the full report. And I did receive 7 binders late today. They're full printed reports. You should have also, I believe, electronic copy. Rick, is that correct?
That is correct.
They have the electronic of the full report. If you want the binded copy, I have those in my office and I can get those to you. But on the bottom of page 49, it basically discloses the budgeted amounts that were forecast for ending fund balance of June 30, 2024. That would be $4.9 million. The actual numbers at the end of the audit and review came out to be $5.251 million. So that would be a variance with final budget positive of $322,489. And I didn't memorize all the rest of it. I don't know how many people want to hear about it tonight.
And the one area for kind of for us to continue to focus on in an area of consistent with previous findings with regards to segregation of duties and size of the department.
Segregation of duties will be another area that they're reviewing this year, right? And they're earmarking that as to a small department.
Can you just explain what that means, segregation of duties, just for
Right,
folks?
and they don't actually interview or review the jobs or the, per se, the day-to-day duties of that. What they look at is that we have a small department, and so what they're, and they do this, Rick, you said, every year, as far as that review. So what they're finding is, and I've seen this oftentimes in the last 20 years with segregation of duties, if you're in a smaller company, they will earmark that, just because they don't feel like there's multiple layers of oversight, right? So we have myself, right, oversee a few individuals, right? Rick oversees me, and the school board oversees this, and then we have the auditors. So those are the layers of review.
Vicki, do you have any questions for Kara or comments?
The positive budget number amount, what is that? Where'd it come from? I guess I lost, I was trying to find the page here.
So prior to, going into 23-24, the forecast or the budgeted number was the $4.9 million at the bottom there.
Okay.
What happened at the end and what the result was at the end was also, and you see the negative, if you see negative 629 there, that's also aligning with the financials that we've been giving after all the cuts that had to be made last year.
Okay.
Versus losing the, per se, $1 million or $900,000 that was forecast. With all the cuts, then it came up to be about 629 loss in the fund balance. So your resulting number here would be the 5.25 million is your fund balance, is the forecast, or the ending fund balance for 23, for the 23-24 audit.
Okay.
So it's good news out of bad news.
We had.
It is.
We still deficit spent, right? You spent
not-
more than we received,
Yeah.
but not as bad.
Not as much as what we had thought we were going to. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought it was, but I just wanted to clarify. Okay. And we think all of that comes down to a lot of our cuts and things that we made and positions we didn't fill and all that other stuff just
Throughout the year.
throughout
Correct.
the year. I would imagine too that we budgeted so much for fuel and heating and we didn't have to deal with maybe those
That's tough
super
money,
high bills. You know, the winter was a lot easier to deal with and numbers wise probably worked out a little better there. And I know Mike, probably Hoika, was able to cut his budget spending was probably lower because of the maintenance referendums projects that he could
Correct.
do. Okay.
Helen?
No, I don't.
Katie, do you have any questions here?
Okay.
Well, a little bit. I just wanted to ask one thing, which is where is this posted, or where do we store this information so others can see it? Do we put it on our website? Do we?
I don't know about that part.
So we put an executive summary at the annual meeting every
Okay.
year. That usually is in September. It is available for people to request
Okay.
or come in and look at a copy.
Okay, and I asked that because one of our public comment speakers had asked about an audit, and I just wanted, I wish the person was still here to hear, but we have this independent audit happens every year. It's required to happen every year. It's an independent audit, which I know that you mentioned it's 50 pages. There's a 12-page summary kind of in here too, and it explains what is required to be of them as an independent audit. And I just wanted to make sure if people wanted access to this, they knew how to go ahead and get it. And then I wanted to call point to the segregation of duties. That is something that is brought up, I think, every year that I've been on the board. That is, I believe, the only thing that we've really been audited on, like tagged on or pulled back from. And the way that we can solve that problem, my understanding, is that we hire more staff within our office. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where because of the size we are, because our audits come out accurate without problem every time, we haven't decided to invest more within that staff, and it's another $100,000 kind of salary when it comes to benefits and all that kind of stuff. And so that's why that keeps coming back, and that's our choice, that we feel we're right sized within our staff there. And then I was going to ask about that fund balance increase. I'm happy to hear that it was on the positive side. And really, I guess my overall question was, we were a little bit inaccurate in those numbers or our predictions. Is it just that kind of those final numbers rolled in and that's just where it was? Okay, and some of it was the timing of it all and all that?
Timing.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it basically takes them 6 months to audit us, right?
Yep.
So because the final numbers came in,
Yep.
I believe, last week.
Okay.
And so, and oftentimes things come in after, after the school year starts that actually should have been looked back. So some of these things might be variations in our books, in the findings, just having it received in August or September.
Perfect.
All that didn't come in before.
Thank you.
Sure. And with what I have, with the other board members that I've spoken with up at CISA, we are not the only district who is on the late end of getting their audits completed. It seems to me that everybody that I've spoken to up there, they have to use Clifton Allen Larson. Like, that's pretty much.
It's pretty standard to have it back by the end of the year.
And
they have a deadline, I believe it's like December 15th or something.
Yeah.
Clifton Larson does.
Yeah, so we're not the only district who doesn't have the numbers up front right away when we'd love to have them. We'd love to have them sooner. We just don't get them, and yeah, they get backlogged with all the districts that they're doing audits on, so.
Pat, anything?
No questions, just good that we got the audited fund balance. We can use that in our modeling going forward, so great.
Yep, all my questions were answered, so thanks. Nice job, Kara.
Thank you.
We can take a motion here.
I move to accept the Clifton Larson Allen audit for the 2023-24 fiscal year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. Next item is G, consider Superintendent and Finance Department recommendation for salary adjustments.
Yes, as you know, we came out of the November 5th election with a successful supported referendum that's going to be invested into our operations. You, as a board, identified 4 priorities, And the first priority was to make sure that we were investing back in our staff that had provided excellent performance, as you know, both on the academics. You see that we are in the top 10 both in status and gains, as Michael Kozmowski has shared with you over these multiple months on Wisconsin Forward, as well as the Wisconsin Report Card. Secondly, you were looking at making sure that we invested in resources to make sure that staff have the resources they need to be able to deliver innovative instructional programs, and that we're able to make sure that students have the resources they need in order to continue to excel. Third, we wanted to make sure that we reinstated dollars that were cut from the budget for athletics and the arts, and that would be reinstated starting fall 2025. We're currently working with Matt Smith, our activities director, to make sure that C teams, when they have an option with regards to winter sports, and we're able to provide activities, since the dance cards usually in competition have already been scheduled, that they would occur. And then finally, there was to make sure that we were putting money into our operations. As you know, we have fixed costs. The fixed costs are things like electricity, heating, fuel for our buses, and kind of making sure that as those rates continue to increase, you know that healthcare is one of the largest drivers for our budget. Currently, it's over $2 million. This year, we were at 0% increase, but you have a cap of 12% next year, which is a headwind of $100,000. The reason that we're here, and the reason that we continue to be here as school districts, is because the funding from the Wisconsin legislature continues to lag CPI. We know that Prescott Public Schools, if Act 10 was not implemented, if inflation was not taken out of per pupil aid, if in 2008 the per pupil amount that Prescott Public Schools was funded continues to lag all of our other communities. We are $47 above the floor. We are $1,200 per student below Hudson. The only way you can invest in your staff is based on the money that comes in per pupil. You have done amazing things, but you have some headwinds in front of you. You know that the $325 that's been provided in the future biennium is now in front of the Supreme Court. Your budget for next year is based on receiving that $325. You know that the Department of Education at the national level provides money at the federal level. That federal institution has been targeted for being dismantled, that provides both the provisions for special education and over $70,000 for title programs. We have informed St. Joe's that if the department and title programs are removed, that Prescott Public Schools would not be able to continue to do the interventions and partnership through Title I, because those dollars would not be provided to us. You also know that we currently cross-subsidize for special education $1.8 million. Special education was supposed to be funded at 60%. It is currently funded at 30%. That $1.8 million is currently in front of, and in January, when the Wisconsin legislature comes back, there is a proposal to elevate that to 60%. That would give us 60 cents on the dollar of the cost. For every dollar we get back in special education funding, that goes back into Fund 10, which goes into operations. So, our goal is to continue to make sure that the legislature that sits on $4 billion of surplus of our taxpayers' money is not sitting in a bank in Madison, but reinvested in the programs and the people that are delivering stellar educational performance in the classroom, in the stage, and on our fields. And that is what and why we're in this predicament. Thank goodness our community stepped up and is willing to invest in the Prescott Public Schools. You went through a very analytic Baird model in April. You continued through the summer. And we were able to look at trying to elevate our salaries. As you know, we were trying to be above the 50th percentile, between the 50th and 75th percentile, based on strategic direction for the school board. We are currently about $1,500 below the mean and the median in CISA 11. At the end of the year, the school district did award a 2.5% increase for our licensed staff and salaried staff, and we held our steps and lanes for our hourly employees, but it was built in to have a 3 to 4% increase. At this time, and based on the analytics and the work that you did on the 11th, we are proposing an allocation that would take effect beginning on January 30th, that all hourly employees would receive a $1 increase per hour. That will amount to an increase of about $80,000 to our current budget. Because we did not have any major benefit changes, it has little impact on benefits, so it's all on salary at this time. There'll be a little bit of impact for retirement, WRS, and Social Security. As you make more, you put in more for Social Security and WRS. At this time, we're proposing that our licensed staff and hourly employees that went from 2023-24 to this fall of a 2.5 increase to increase that overall to a salary on wages of an increase of 4%. Because hourly people are paid two weeks in the rear, they would be paid on January 30th, effective their work from January 1st forward, and that our licensed staff would be seeing this increase on their January 15th payroll. That comes out to just shy of about $180,000 added into this year's budget. Next year, because of healthcare being currently at 0, that will be another $100,000, so now you're at $280,000. And then we were looking at future increases of 3%. Kara has been working with Baird, and we have the updated model that came in from Elise earlier this week, right? And so by January, we'll be able to come back and start modeling for you. By no means is this done. There's a series of recommendations under this business that will take steps, but the first one is to make salary adjustments for our hourly. We believe that this is a conservative but necessary step to take to make sure that our staff are being fairly compensated for the work they're doing. So we're proposing a $1 raise effective for work that begins on January 1st, 2025, paid out beginning on January 30th, and an additional 1.5 raise, bringing a 4% increase for our salary that would hit their January 15th. Bus drivers, and I've been talking with Heather, will receive an equitable stipend. We hope to have that in place for you by January. It's just that they have a more convoluted salary structure by hours and length of route, and so we just were unable to get that to you within a week, and they will be compensated, and we hope to have that wrapped up for our January meeting. So that's part one of the considerations that we have with regards to salary adjustments for hourly and salary.
Tanya, any comments on this one?
Yes.
The work session?
Yep. This is all things that were discussed at the work session where we had other documents and data and were able to look at what other districts their increases are, as well as their overall pay and stuff. And so I wanted to first ask about the work session, because again, that was a comment that was brought up, and we can comment on it here because it pertains to this agenda item. But where do we post our work session so the public's aware of that?
So they get posted on the website, And 3,
So City Hall, Pierce County Journal, the website, and Patax, okay. And how far, I know we talked about it at the last board meeting that we were going to have a work session. Is that, what is the requirement for how, the length of time ahead of time that they're posted? Is it what?
with it,
Within at least 1 week, yep, okay. Perfect. And I just want to make sure, because those are really, and I know I bring it up here a lot, but those are really good times for us, for the public to be able to hear how we have those conversations. But at that time, you shared, and Rick, you shared information from all of our surrounding districts in our conference, comparables and stuff, and looked at the salaries of staff there. We looked at most specifically licensed staff. We tried, our goal was for this moment in time, because we're mid-year, to get everybody to at least that kind of average increase in our comparable districts and surrounding areas, and one that also increased the salary enough to get our teachers kind of to that close to mid-range level, not quite, I mean, it's close, but it's not quite there yet. And so that was our first goal. And so the second goal, though, that we talked about, and it's our next agenda item on here, is I think we would all be super excited to give a larger increase right off the bat, but we also agreed, and we have been talking about this for many months, to do a study of our overall HR benefits and contracts and stuff like that. And so that's a really important step for us to do before we can just start handing out or like increasing those salaries across the board. Because if we just keep increasing the percentages, but we're not looking at some of the areas that we know that we're really struggling with to retain our staff long-term, it's not helping the problem, and we don't want to backtrack or have some really inequitable raises in the future. And so for right now, I feel super comfortable. I wish it could be more, but knowing that we're trying to be fiscally responsible and we're doing a study so we can hopefully get to a better spot, is that $1 increase feels, I mean, that's something that I'm really great behind. The 1.5 additional increase to equal 4% raise for all of our staff or our licensed staff, that's really comparable to what our other districts around us had. And so I feel really good about that for this time being. I hope that we are able to do something similar in the future for here on out, but that's something that we really have to look at that study for. And then I wanted to call forward, it sounds like that the bus driver's pay scale is very involved with a lot of different things that go with mileage and time and all kinds of stuff. And I did want to ask that everybody else is going to get to see this increase sometime in January. And unfortunately, our bus drivers, we're not going to bring that conversation back until January. So I'm hoping that we're able to kind of back pay for that same month of time. And that's something I would be interested in hearing how that would work out. So that way they have that same month period where they would also get the raise. It's not like,
oh, yeah.
we just didn't have that time.
Yeah, so Heather will work with both Kara and myself, and we're looking at a kind of a stipend for them.
Okay.
So that it'd be a lump sum that would happen for them.
Yeah, because I don't want them to lose out on like that extra month that other staff members within our system would be getting. So I really don't have other questions. I would say that at that work session, we asked probably every 6th or 7th sentence, Rick, can we afford this? Rick, will this be sustainable? And that was a thing that was really important to us. And even though we did pass the referendum, and it seems like, oh, we have this big lump sum money, we have been deficit spending. And so some of that money is going to where we've been deficit spending to kind of make that right. And additionally, which is not brought up here, we talked about earlier at our elementary, we did also invest in staff. It's not through raises, but to increase to a full-time second grade teacher too. So some of that dollars in investment goes into alleviating those high stress points within our elementaries. And we knew that second grade was potentially going to be a worry. We increased staffing to a 0.6 partway through the year. I think like a month or two into the school year, Sarah brought it to us. And now we are able to confidently increase to that 1.0 because of the community's commitment here. So I don't really have any other questions about it, but
No, Tanya, well done. No other questions. We've got another business item to talk about here real soon, and we've got a discussion item too about how we look at compensation and the process going forward. So I've got no questions. Tanya did a good job. I agree with what you said. Vicki?
Yeah, same with one of the things Tanya brought up was for the bus drivers, making sure that is, even though they have the convoluted calculation on how their pay is calculated, I guess make sure that they are getting the compensation similar to what other hourly employees are getting. But I guess that would be something if it's been, an issue on how to figure it out, how to somehow make it easier going forward. So when we do things like this, I think we need to figure out a better way so that there isn't this delay and so that it is some type of additional amount onto the base of a bus driver. We need to figure out how to make all of that work. That would be my only request for this, from this point going forward for the bus drivers. I think what you're doing, giving them the stipend to get them to that level of what we're granting other hourly is okay, but I would think we need to address that sooner than later.
So yeah, the study will say more for me, whether that happens in-house or we decide to go outside with that, because the 1.5, to get that up to the 4.0, like we said, we did look at during the work session. We did look at the surrounding schools, and we understand that, especially, I'm a teacher, so I get it, right? So we wanted to get our staff up to that, but it's really important, like we've talked at length about groups that aren't represented and that didn't have the same raises years back, and to get them where they need to be as well. So a lot of discussion went into this, and this is the word that came to play too, is sustainability. We want to make sure that the raises are sustainable, and that we're not just throwing out a willy-nilly number. We really do the research and kind of and how this will how this can be sustainable long-term for our teachers. So other than that, no.
Just a couple of comments maybe from the work session that I recall. First of all, the reason we can do this year is because the referendum passed in November. So we were able to acquire the funds and appropriate them to salaries and staff for this school year. So that's really important, and that's really why we pushed for November and not next year. So we could try to address this as soon as we could. Secondly, the 1.5% increase for the salaries, I just wanted to make a comment on that. When we talked about this at the work session, there's really two ways to do it. You could either do a stipend at the end of the year and try to get teachers money in one lump sum by the end of the year, or do we immediately increase their baselines and try to get try to give them something so their baseline starts increasing immediately in January. And I think the recommendation was pretty strongly by Rick and the administration was to go with the 1.5% right away in January versus the stipend. There's positives and negatives to both. I think we just landed on going with the 1.5%. So that I did want to call that out, and that, to everybody's point on the board here, that was just a way to get money in teachers' pockets right away and try to do something positive as soon as we could, knowing that we're setting money aside to account for the adjustments that we're going to be making with the overall salary structure and adjustments that need to be made across the board with groups of teachers for the whole equity piece that you were talking about, Tanya. So the other thing I wanted to call out was we did a lot of cuts in the early, after the April referendum. And there was a lot of positions either that were just not rehired or eliminated. And when the admin team was challenged with, what after the referendum passed, what spots are we hurting in? What do we need right now? they just came back with the 1.0 ad from 0.6 to 1.0. There was no additional staff additions at this time, which means that they're really making the most out of the staff that they have. And I appreciate that, because when we can make it work with what we have, that money can go to teachers that we already have, our staff that we already have, that's licensed and non-licensed. So I think, making it work with the staff that we have allows the dollars that we are acquiring to go into the staff that are here now. So I just want to call out, I appreciate the admin team. I know that was a tough conversation, and I appreciate the effort that the admin team did on that. I think that was it, Rick?
Yeah, I do want to just point out one thing, and it's on the third column, right, is that we do have hourly employees for food service. They are in Fund 50, not Fund 10. Fund 50 is continuing to lose money. We'll talk about that when we get to Vision 2035 and how many facilities do you run. But the headwinds are known. The most amount of revenue is this school year, 24-25, for the Prescott Public Schools, unless there's additional funding for Madison. Because we're funded by students, we have fewer students than we've had when this high school opened. You had 3 facilities, you now have 4. You have fewer students than you had when you went to 4 buildings. You only get funded for students walking through the door, and it's fixed. We know it's $325, and we're at the lowest end, other than $47, above the lowest funded district. Fund 50 is losing money, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later tonight. If it does and is unable to sustain itself, it cannot go negative, and we currently are at the high end for breakfast and lunch meal prices. That means that Fund 10 will be paying that dollar increase. And every dollar, just like special education, every dollar that comes out of Fund 10 can't be used for anything else. So this is incorporated. It is kind of a headwind that we'll have to talk about, but they are deficit spending. They continue to deficit spend, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But in general, we can confirm we can weather it this year, and is projected into next year with future increases. So Tanya, you're right. That's why the modeling is important for us to do. And then we'll continue, if we're able to make future adjustments, we will continue like we did with teaching and learning. We're going to add finance and reports as a standing item for you from January to the end of the year.
Couple more comments I wanted to make. The one thing we talked about at the work session as well was the ability to, we think, based on kind of the projections, now things change at the state level and it could impact it if funding gets removed, but a 3% increase on average over the next several bienniums is what we're projecting at this point. That's what we kind of forecasted. So I think that's another positive thing when you look at this. If the referendum had failed, we would be really scrambling. We'd be cutting and we'd be looking at salary freezes. But because of the past referendum, we're not only trying to get teachers money right this year and then make adjustments in the off season, but we're also projecting that we can commit to a 3% raise at least every year for the next couple of biennium cycles. At least that's what the forecasting is telling us. So I think that's really important. And lastly, Tanya made a comment on work sessions, and there was a comment made in the public comment. Work sessions have been going on for years. We've been doing, and it's a great tool for school boards to collaborate and roll their sleeves up and really get the dirty work done that we need to do to get to a point where we're coming into these meetings well prepared. Almost every district uses them. It's a very common tool. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about how work sessions work and why it's such a great tool. So, anything else? No. All right, we should make a motion here.
I move to accept the superintendent and finance department recommendations for salary adjustments for all PSD hourly and salaried staff based on the December 11th work session for the 2024-2025 school year, or fiscal year, sorry.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. Great. Nice work, board and administration. Thank you.
Kara, thank you very much. Thank you for the long evening. Thank you for the...
Yeah, Kara.
What a trooper.
All right, we got item H, review proposals to complete an HR job study.
So you have received, prior to the referendum, we had been speaking with you. In 2018, we partnered with Teamworks and had our teachers participate in completely revamping our pay scale with steps and lanes, how we identified some longevity targets. We also elevated the low base rate, and then we shrunk the amount of credits the teachers needed between moving from one lane to the next. That happened over 16 sessions. That is something that I think is open for us to consider starting in January for another round of participating with our staff to have input on reviewing how our steps and lanes and other areas can be done. We do know, however, that job studies and benchmarking is both empirical and scientific, and believe that it should happen by a third party. Chantel has, from your HR department, solicited 2 recommendations. We reached out to 5 different companies. We received 2 full proposals, one in October and one in November. And for what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through the 2. We have one from, I think it's from Accelera, but also known as HR in Tune, Alera, sorry. What they do is there are 2 phases. They will look at benchmarking to other databases with regards to how we currently are paying both hourly and salaried staff. It looks at per position. So when you say per position, we're talking about the collective. So if we want to include our admin assistants, our paras, our food service, bus transportation, roughly we have about 8 to 9 groups that'll come out to about 2,200. Then the work stream would be based on, they would start to analyze all of the pay rates that we currently are putting forward, and they look at our tables. They look for internal consistency and variability. So when they look at the hourly employees, they'll look at who is the highest paid per hour and whether or not that ranking is justifiable by the role and responsibility within our district, and then how that differs. So if you look at a custodial position versus a bus driver versus an aide versus a front office staff, how does that compare? And then how each step works. For our licensed staff, there's many different databases. The state of Wisconsin provides all of the salaries for teachers. However, it is typically a year or 2 delayed, but there is information that we have also from CISA 11 that is current. We'll be able to work and tap into that work, and then we'll also have them come back and create some creation compensation alternatives for us to consider. Very similar to when we work with Teamworks, there's options for the board to consider. Finance will run it through the Baird model to look at longevity and how that plays out based on the funding that we're receiving and our ability then to sustain any adjustments that you make. Overall, this proposal would be about $10,500, $10,700. They have been very responsive in reporting. kind of their process, it kind of walks you through their stages. They do have a face-to-face meeting where their personnel come on site. They talk a little bit with regards to what is your compensation philosophy. We talked about that, and I think Vicki, you brought up many different options when we were meeting here on December 11th. They start to look at who the comparison groups are for that benchmarking, and then they also start to look at position descriptions, how that plays out, how is a teacher job responsibility at elementary similar or different at middle school and high school, as well as an administrative aide. What are the roles and responsibilities at an elementary school, middle school, and high school, and the like. Then they'll come back and create some exhibits for us and be able to present to the district administration and then ultimately to the school board. They do have, one of the benefits of having personnel like this, I think, gives you an objective opinion. It allows them to come in, and individuals that have worked with many other public schools, but also ability to tap into databases that go well beyond what Chantel Byram would be able to access in a individual and HR position of one. Then they'll also kind of model some future alternatives if you were to look at some things that we'll be talking with our staff in January. We also received a comprehensive report from Newport. This came in, and what we liked is the tightness of kind of how they walk through and cascade the project from planning and approach and total rewards. They do market analysis. It is a little bit more a la carte, so if you want to have market analysis for support staff and administration versus like when we look at our supervisors of Mike Koika, Heather Christensen for transportation, they're incorporated in the Alera program as an extension of that unit versus being separate. They also look at salary structure development, employee pay analysis. Their estimates, and based on the work that Chantel has done following up, the range, although it's 10,700 to 15,000, it would be more towards the 15,000 range. And it could go higher if you want to include administrators in that piece. So, Chantel also put together for you kind of a pro and con. At this time, she is recommending that we go with Alera, which is in HR in Tune. It is a more reasonable financial piece. We thought they were also, in talking to them, responsive to us and any questions and follow-up in a timely manner. We also thought that they had, we thought in just kind of our goodness of fit, felt like they would elevate us to be maybe more of a priority. Their timelines are quicker. We would be able to start within 5 days of having a contract approved, meaning that we could start the process in early January and hopefully have a report kind of end of February, depending on the parameters that the board or the finance department puts in play.
Vicki, do you have any questions for Rick?
Not, I guess, not, comments? Well, so the second proposal we got with Newport, their timeline was when they had a spot available, they would...
Yeah, we get in a queue, yep.
They would do us, okay. Yeah. So this would align really well with starting meetings with the teaching staff to start to ask where those adjustments need to happen, what they're looking at as problem areas. That would be going on around the same time as this study could start. So then that was something you had said that this study would take into consideration and look at what the staff was looking at as far as what their concerns are and putting that into some of their, okay.
Analysis, yes.
Analysis,
That's
okay.
why I kind of liked it. They were kind of parallel tracks that ultimately could come together.
Okay.
And it all could come together, we believe, with Proposal 1 within this fiscal year, where I think the Proposal 2 with Newport would be very challenging to have it completed and fully implemented prior to June 30th.
Okay, and, I mean, we know that we have staff that have, with some of the meetings we had earlier this year with the different buildings, we do have staff that have concerns, and I'm guessing that they are ready to go and are ready to meet with admin and start hammering this out as soon as possible. So.
Agreed.
Okay.
Helen?
I guess that the only thing it does come with a price tag, and that is hard. I know that an outside venue, we talk about.
Speaking in the microphone.
Oh, sorry, an outside venue. I'm usually loud enough. An outside venue, like, the time is good, right? It's impartial, but really our HR here is HR for a reason, right? Human resources, they're impartial. So I just get, I'm wondering what the load for us to do it internally would, how much that would heighten her work.
Yeah, knowing her workload, so when we get to the end of calendar year, January, we're talking about having to meet governmental responsibilities to get all of the W-2s out and also the Affordable Care Act out to all staff members. And we also are reporting to the IRS all the taxes. So it's kind of like a kind of final exam, if you will. It's a very stressful time for finance and HR. That consumes almost all of January of their workload. In addition, we have other things that are in play that HR is doing. I honestly do not believe that she would have the time that we could allocate without having other things suffer that are kind of standard practice.
Okay, so the next question would be, if we decide to go external, is there a good, does this team provide a good, I'm gonna get this word wrong, model, I guess, so we can use this as a goal, so we're not back in the same position 4 years from now, that we can follow and be like, okay, this is how they figured this out for our HR team or person to kind of follow?
Yeah, I guess it's almost like any organization, right? I think that coaching and having, top athletes have coaching. I think school boards often have coaching that comes in. I don't think it's an area of weakness when you look at expertise in the field that have the ability to and the personnel to perform service. It's like why we have a legal counsel. I hope that framework that they provide and in concert, since 2018, we've been able to have something in place for now 6 years. And it's time for us to kind of revamp it. But I think that having TeamWorks come in and facilitate it back then was great, but we didn't have the benchmarking piece. And so I do think that this is a time for us to recalibrate based on a system that is kind of an antiquated system of steps and lanes. Our staff in 2018 did not want to go away from steps and lanes. They were adamant. And so I do like the idea that they also will come in with some alternative compensation models. And I think that their flexibility and also the timing that you've directed as a board for administration and finance to meet with our staff, I think it's a nice synergy.
Well, and this is, I've talked with someone from the county board, and I believe you had a conversation with someone from the county board, and the county had said for them, they did this a couple years ago, I think, and that was a huge benefit to get things in line, to adjust their salaries so they were able to be more competitive with outside of Ellsworth. I mean, they were able to expand their pool that they were drawing candidates from. And, we have lost teachers to districts in Wisconsin that aren't that far, neighboring districts who do have the ability to pay more and have had that. We know we need to adjust. We've lost teachers to Minnesota. So I think getting that benchmark of knowing where we're at, how we sit with the surrounding area is, yeah, I think that's something that, you know, we're a small district, again, goes back to the overlapping of duties. And we just, if this only comes along once every 6-8 years, I mean, then we just, I think this is where you pay the experts to tell you, this is where you need to be, or this is what you really need to look at, so.
And I may have said this before, but I also wanted to clarify. So one of the benefits of this is obviously the external benchmarking. They also examine and kind of put up a mirror for you to reflect, is there internal consistency? So I think that that's an area that we know that we have to kind of examine, and I think that that'll be beneficial to have that lens.
All right. Katie, anything? Good idea. Tanya?
Yeah, I often am a little wary of consultant agencies and stuff like that coming in and Helen, to your point, doing some of the work that I'm like, oh, we have staff to do that. However, I think in this situation, we prioritize our staff and compensation, and I don't feel comfortable just throwing percentages at, I think, a system that's not equitable, and one of our speakers tonight brought that up as well. And so I'm really in favor of investing to make sure that we are kind of renorming our system, whether we're comparing it to others. I'm really interested in the internal consistency that we might find within what I consider to be somewhat of an audit of our pay systems. I think it's worth the money. It makes me feel more confident as a board member that when we're giving 3%, 4%, hopefully more types of increases, that I know that it's really being across the board equitable. And I think that what we're going to find is that there are some pieces, which was again brought up tonight, in our system where we have teachers that are really kind of not making the same progress on that pay scale as others. And so there's going to be some tough conversations of additional elevation beyond just certain percentages to kind of right-size certain areas within that. And I'm only comfortable having that with kind of that independent outside audit looking at it. And so for me, this is worth the investment. It's part of what I felt like was necessary in order for us to keep moving forward. I had a couple questions in regard to some of the things that these two different proposals will look at. One, did we have any recommendations from neighboring districts for either of these? And maybe you said that and I didn't hear it, but.
The Newport did work with Osceola.
Okay.
A couple of years ago. Alera, we only have the companies that they have previously worked with, but not
anybody around us, really. Okay. And then will both of our systems, because I am interested in making sure all of our staff are paid well, paid equitably, and paid comparable to surrounding districts. So that includes for me licensed staff, teachers, licensed support staff. And when I say licensed support staff, I think we always think teachers, but we have school psychologists, school counselors, social, and we have all kinds of other staff that make our systems work, interventionalists, all of these people within our district that I want to look at as well. And then does it also look at hourly staff at all? And you brought that up, and administrative staff. Both of them do all of those groups?
Both companies do. We, and Chantel's working in the pro-con paper that she put forward was that Alera was a little more cost-effective in that, in their proposal. But yes, all staff positions, hourly and salaried, would be falling under this job study.
Which for me is really important, that we're not just looking at the teachers or we're looking at whatever. We're just looking at every position across the board. And again, it goes back to that external, independent agency that's kind of auditing how we're compensating our staff. And so I'd be really curious compared to other districts where we're at, as well as within our system. And then you answer the question about Newport timelines a little bit. We're going to go into a queue. Any predictions on how fast we move through that queue, or just really they couldn't even tell us how many?
They couldn't really, and
Okay.
I also just think both cost-wise, that piece, and then the drawn-out process from how long it takes once they start meeting with us.
Yep.
We just thought that Alera was the better choice between the two companies.
Yeah, I mean, it works with our timelines really well.
Yeah.
And then I only have two more questions. Do they also look at benefits as well? Because the pay scale is one thing, but it's all the other things that go into.
I will, let's see.
I didn't see it on here, but this is a summary.
I'll follow up.
Okay.
But I would think they would, because they talk about compensation.
Yep.
When it says salary only, compensation usually is benefits. But I'll make sure that we get back to you on that.
Okay, I think that's an important piece of it too, because the salary just speaks part of the story.
Correct.
And then my final question, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, our first step really is to have kind of this outside analysis of our system and our pay scales, and then there's obviously going to be some, contact with teachers and staff members in there, but then secondly, once we get those recommendations, we're going to put back together some of those staff teams to look at pay scales, specifically like we had our teacher team in the past. Is that kind of the second step of all of this, reconvening some of that?
Oh, yes, and I also think then you'll have finance crunching kind of how that plays out.
Okay, because I also want that staff voice within the final decisions of how we move forward. Okay, great, thank you.
Pat?
Keep asking Tanya first before it's my turn, because
I know.
I got nothing else.
She takes
No, she did a great job again. The Alera Group, did we ask the question, do they have any school district clients that they either are currently or have worked with in the past?
I will have to defer and get back to you on that.
Okay. And I don't know if that slows this process down at all. I would be disappointed if they didn't. I know that Newport used Osceola, and that's here in our summary page. Just a couple of things. I'm not going to repeat everything. You guys all did a great job. Helen, I had a same comment about, is this something we could possibly take on internally? I agree. I think that would have been a massive stretch. Is it something that we could have, bought some published data and kind of done ourselves? And I agree. I think the things that stick out to me are being able to have somebody bring back some potential creative compensation packages, be able to mine more data than an HR or a publication would get, and then the kind of that audit, we use that word, the audit of job duties, I think is another important piece that, it's real money, $10,000. But there's a tremendous amount of value there to make sure that we're getting this right. I hope we can use this information in the future. I just want to be a realist. I think over the course of time, especially stuff like COVID pops in between, here and there, this is going to be something from time to time the district has to do. In private business, which I know is way different than school districts. This is something we do routinely every year, so fairly common, but I guess those are my only comments.
I don't have anything really else to add, except I think this is a necessary step in the process. I like it because it insulates the district and it allows a third party to come in and really evaluate our salaries and compare them and benchmark them against other districts. Yes, the price tag it's nothing to sniff at or sneeze at, but it's for what we're getting for the money. I think we're getting basically a report that we'll be able to make decisions on, base decisions on, right? So, and the timelines we're looking at would be somewhere in the spring. Rick, when do we think that if we pull the trigger, what would?
Well, the one's really quick.
Yeah, I think it's quick with, but I think to be able to do a good job, I want to be able to continue to zipper between the work that we're doing with our teachers or different hourly staff and have that input as part as this company continues to both review and make recommendations. So but I'm confident that they can hit kind of be able to give you things that we can start reacting to in the February-March time period, based on what they've shared with us to date.
Can I ask a little bit about just the motion here? It says, it's asking for us to choose a place. I am not sure I'm comfortable choosing a place without some of the questions that we asked. And so like for me, the things that are important, I want to make sure that they're looking at benefits. And I think Pat brought up a really good point about making sure that each have worked, we know one has, but with schools, I don't want to be the guinea pigs of that. And schools are super nuanced in how we have pay scales and stuff like that. And so could we instead do a motion just to approve a dollar amount up to, because we know that it's like 15,000 was the high end, or is it that you want to come back? Because I feel like we need more information to make.
Honestly, I would say that I think our next board meeting is on the 15th.
Okay.
Is that right?
I was going to say, because dollars-wise, you said it could
There's
be
a range.
max,
Yeah.
and it could, if we ask for more, go over that.
Yeah, I would just, personally, I would just say table it. We can bring back
On the 15th.
the proposal on the 15th. Nothing's really going to happen between now and the 15th anyway.
True.
And gives us the opportunity to get you to confirm with Chantel that benefits are included in this compensation review and a list of schools that they've worked with.
So that was just my two. I don't know if anybody had other.
I like that. I just want to make sure, Rick, do you think, based on you and Chantel's discussion with the Lair Group, they would still be able to move quickly once? Okay, so we're not missing a window that they had maybe to move quickly?
Yeah.
You probably don't know that for sure. But
I would, personally, I think the two questions that you have are sufficient that I would just say it's not worth rushing.
Okay.
And I'll follow up with them, and if we had to have an emergency meeting to do it, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't be able to keep the promise on the resources and timelines.
Are there any other must-musts that people feel like we don't know for sure that we want to find out? So Rick doesn't have to keep going back and forth?
No, I think the one about working with schools would be nice. And if there was any references.
I know they've worked with the universities, but.
I was going to
I'll
say
have to
university,
get
I
back
thought I saw was part of their.
Okay. We can table it. We haven't made a motion, so I don't think we need to make one. We can just go back and add it as an agenda item in January.
Correct.
So.
If we're good with that.
So I think you ask for a motion, no one makes a motion, and we move on.
Is there any motions to be made here? Okay, we'll move on. Yep. We'll move on to item J. Wait, item, I is my.
Looks kind of like a J on here. It's not Mike's.
Consider rebuilding the Prescott Middle School wrestling room.
Yes. We talked a little bit about, and it's kind of, how do you not wait for perfect information before you kind of make some additional steps. So we are going to be talking later about Vision 2035. We're going to be talking about 4 facilities versus 3. What are some of your timelines? However, during the work that we've been doing with the 2022 bond for infrastructure, because of the water infiltration under the mezzanines and the air handler units, we did have to deconstruct at 1220 the current middle school, the whole wrestling room. We removed the elevated plywood floor. We removed the mats, made sure the mold and radon were abated. That was what the infrastructure work has allowed us to do. We currently have, based on the audit, some additional dollars that are still in the bond 2022, and the administration would like to rebuild that wrestling room. Currently, The middle school wrestlers are wrestling up in the cafeteria. It's not ideal, and the mats don't necessarily affix to the floor well. Currently, we partner with the Prescott youth in the community. They are currently up at the Prescott High School. It continues to grow, and we also have a varsity wrestling team. That space is becoming an issue. We would really like to move forward with replacing the floor. So once we took out the wood and the mats, it is just poured concrete. The water infiltration does no longer penetrates that part, so we're confident that the floor going in. We are looking at a proposal for the flooring. It's about $31,000. It's very similar to the flooring that's currently in the athletic room here at the high school, so we know that the flooring has held up and we're happy with it. We are also looking at putting in LED lights and tying that in with lowering that below the ductwork and also having the occupancy sensor allotted with that. This would allow middle school currently that is 6-8 to have our special education PE programming rather than in the hallways into an area. If the district were to combine and consolidate buildings for 4-8, it would give us a secondary athletic area for lifetime fitness, for yoga, stretching, and weightlifting. So we see it as not only an immediate short-term fit, but also a long-term viable construction for an area that historically was a wrestling room. The good news is that, again, this is not anything from the operating levy. This is a $38,000 project that would be coming out of the 2022 bond referendum.
All right, Pat, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah, great. Awesome. I was hoping Tanya was in it. I don't have many questions. This was, again, I'm going to go back to, years ago during that bond referendum, and Vicki and I were on our facilities committee. This space was a real problem. Taking the space offline created a problem within the district. It's now cleaned up. It's ready to go. We do need to build it back. It was something that wasn't initially put into the budget because we wanted to make sure that the other priority, not that this wasn't a priority, but the MEP systems and the other environmental things got taken care of first. So this creates the additional capacity that those schools and our users need. So I don't have many. My only comment is, Rick, would this be something that Market and Johnson, or would we be doing this ourselves under Mike's direction? Facilitating this.
We would be doing this as owner direct.
Okay, so I don't have many concerns. Mike knows this stuff. There's a checklist on the condition of the floor. Hopefully, I'm sure he's looked at it. So I don't have any other questions. I would support this.
Tanya?
Well, Pat did a very good job over there.
Next time.
Yeah. But I did want to clarify a few things, and that's just because in here, and if anybody's looking at this, they see the word DAPE, and that is an acronym, and it stands for Developmentally Appropriate Physical Education. It is a requirement by special education law that we provide our students with access to developmentally appropriate physical education, and so this is one of those ways that we can do that with more, I would say, I'm using the word equitable a lot today, but like comparable, equitable spaces to their general ed counterparts. So I much prefer they're in a space like this than in the hallways, doing special education PE. And so this feels better. I also just wanted to comment too, I know that because I remember when we built this high school, how expensive those mats are, and I'm looking at the bid on those mats too. And so I would much rather not be rolling those around and moving them all over the place and to cafeterias and stuff like that too. So I just think for the longevity of our mats that are, like $15,000 or something really expensive, that we're able to take a little bit better care of them by not housing them all over the place as well. So, and then lastly, I just wanted to add, I recently had the opportunity with Rick to tour that space down there, and it does look really good. And so I think it's at a place where we can revitalize it and use it for what it was originally purposed for. So, no questions.
Vicki?
No, I think this is great. The fact that we've got a few additional dollars from the 22 bond, that's amazing that we can go in and yeah, do some cleanup here. Another one of the things that was mentioned and kind of on a list, a wish list, along with, you know, paving outside the bus garage. That was on a wish list too, and there was money left over from that bond referendum to be able to do that. So this is, I mean, this is fantastic that we've been able to save some dollars, find some dollars, get some lower bids, get some whatever we needed to do throughout that whole maintenance referendum with the 2 years of work on on all the schools and be able to do this. And yeah, the wrestling program needs a space. We know they need it now. That's fantastic. To get them their own space to be able to do this again, I think is kind of a no-brainer on our end to make sure that there's room for some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of all been said, but, I mean, our date provider's amazing, and he can provide those services in the home, but I would prefer that not to be the case either.
And I should clarify,
so-
it's not always in the hallway. We do, I mean, it does get in the hallway at times, but we also, you know, because we are sharing that gymnasium
Yeah, for sure.
many times, and so there are times where it gets bumped in. I think to Tanya's point, it would be nice if we had a designated space.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's us. And then the wrestling program, we know, I mean, it's a fact that if you don't have a program that can build your high school program and feed into your high school program, and they're not learning the skills when they're younger in a safe environment, in an environment that's dedicated to them, which would be amazing, that hurts your program when you get into high school. So it hurts your program when you get into high school. Gosh, I'm usually loud. I'm sorry. So I think it's a great, and then it's, I mean, it really can be used for multiple things. So that's the great thing. Between DAPE, between the youth wrestling, and then flex space for that lifetime programming. So it's kind of a no-brainer, because if we don't do it, it's a wasted space. So.
Mike, I got one more small comment, though. So because Market isn't going to do this, I think it's just another testament, I think, to Mike, probably our coaches, our administrators, whoever are going to help with this stuff. I mean, we're saving money by doing it that way. So we're making money stretch further. This is night work stuff for everybody involved. This isn't day work job, right? We don't have, in-house construction professionals. So thank you to those folks. If this does end up passing, thank you to those folks who are willing to do this.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Pat. Two things. It's another thing that we can take off the checklist of things that we would have had to have done if the referendum dollars were not able to stretch that far. I'm really happy to see that we're still able to stretch referendum dollars from the bond referendum. So a huge win for us to be able to do this project under the bond referendum.
And I'm glad you brought that back up, because I just wanted to clarify, this is not dollars that are coming out of other funds that we could be using for other things. This is dollars left from our bond back in, I think, 2022 that we can only use for these kind of projects. We were given a list of these projects. I know we review it quite often publicly, but this is one of those things that we're kind of towards the bottom of that, but because of just the, I would say, overall fiscal responsibility of all the people involved, from Mike all the way up and down, we're able to check this off that box as well, so.
All right, we can make a motion here.
I move to approve the rebuild of the Prescott Middle School Wrestling Room to provide areas to deliver DAPE, Middle School and Prescott Youth Wrestling, and flex space for lifetime programming using dollars from the 2022 bond referendum for infrastructure.
I'll second. Sorry, Helen. You gotta be faster.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries, and now we're on item J, if I can see that right.
Yep.
And that's
Yes, it
middle
is
school
J.
lockers for girls and boys locker room.
Yep, so middle school boys and locker room, we have lockers that you have seen photos and videos that are broken or not working. They're no longer kind of the size of what students are bringing to and from their athletics or their backpacks. They don't fit in. So what we do have now is an opportunity to replace those lockers. We did at the time, through Market & Johnson, get a bid of $62,000 to replace those lockers. We currently, at the 125 intermediate school, have 2 locker rooms that are no longer used because it's a 4th and 5th grade building. PCR does not use them. Mike Koika worked with the company that has built our lockers and had installed them. They are able to deconstruct and then move them up to our current middle school for a cost of $12,000. That saves us over $50,000. I hope that makes sense, that it's cost effective. It repurposes and it doesn't take anything away from 125 Elm, and it would solve a problem at our middle school.
Helen?
I have no questions, it makes sense.
Vicki?
Kudos to Mike Koika. Thank you.
Tanya?
This is another one that's coming off of that bond list. We talked about this a while ago as well. Honestly, I think it was like one of the last things we thought we would be able to commit to and do, and so I'm super happy we're able to. And it also, I think it kind of reprioritizes it because that space is needed for other things as well. So it's great, no questions.
Pat?
No, just another awesome creative way by Mike and our administration to solve a large problem with what we have. So thanks to everybody involved with that. I know, Kyle, you had something to do with that too, right? So,
yes, you did.
Right on.
Good job, Kyle. All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move to approve replacing the middle school lockers for girls and boys locker rooms using F49 2022 bond referendum dollars.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries.
Helen seconded.
Yes, I did.
Anybody care if we take a quick 5-minute recess?
No?
I gotta go get some water over there. I'm gonna.
Do you have to go to the bathroom?
Well, I don't know, but we're gonna take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back in, what time is it now? 8:05? 8:05, good? All right.
Works for me.
We are going to resume open session here, and we are past business. Now we are on to information and discussion, and the first item is discuss open enrollment program applications.
All right, hi. Again, Sandy Strand, Director of Student Services. Usually every year in January, we talk about our open enrollment policy, and we talk about special ed programs and programs that have specialized supports that we maybe don't have available in the district. But one other thing that we really do need to also address in January is if we have any class size recommendations for our regular grade levels. And given that, like, for example, this year we were in a situation where we did make a decision to go above the board recommended class sizes, which is fine. We didn't have any caps on grade levels per se for open enrollment. So one of the things I want to talk about tonight is just in general the open enrollment statute and bring forth some recommendations for you to consider for the January board meeting. So if you could go to the next slide. Open enrollment pertains to both the regular and the alternative open enrollment period. It encompasses permissive decision criteria, which the school board does have to make decisions about. It encompasses space availability, both in general education and special education, and then service or program availability. So when we're talking about the regular open enrollment, that's the inter-district public school open enrollment program that allows parents to apply for their children to attend public schools in a school district other than the one they reside in between February and April. That's the regular open enrollment period. The state of Wisconsin also has the alternative open enrollment period, which is pretty much any other time of the school year. So you can open enroll anytime, but the alternative application procedure allows pupils to apply for open enrollment if certain criteria are met. And these criteria are loosely laid out in our current policy 5113, and I'm not suggesting any policy changes, but we do have to go on record in January as having discussed some of these things. So next slide. So the things that the board needs to consider is space availability by grade level, Our policy already includes language about whether the pupil has been expelled within the last preceding school years from any district for things like bomb threats, weapons, etc. Our policy also has information in it about students who are habitual truant, loosely the availability of services, and then we discuss whether or not the child is referred to special education, but if the evaluation is not yet completed by the resident district. There's also language in our policy currently that if a child enrolls and then is subsequently referred to special education, evaluated, and find to require a service that is not available in the district, we then would contact the school board of the resident district and potentially send that child back to their home district.
And can you give an example of services that we don't currently have?
Yes, in the companion document that I shared last year and also this year, that includes things that we contract through CISA, things in a collaborative service agreement with River Falls, such as deaf, hard of hearing services, audiology, physical therapy. This year it would have included occupational therapy for the fall. If a student so any service that we don't have on our payroll personnel is considered unavailable. And technically your policy doesn't need to have language about that because the statute is very clear that if the service is not available in the district, you simply do not have to accept that non-resident student.
Thank you.
So in January, we want to talk about space availability based on projected enrollment, caseloads and workloads, and student-to-staff ratios. So based on the manner which the district provides the program or service, so all services, I already said this, they're contracted through a third-party vendor are considered unavailable, and any service that the non-resident district would need to hire, so if a kid came to us with a one-to-one paraprofessional in their IEP, that service is something that we would have to hire, therefore it would be considered unavailable. And we don't have to have specific language in our policy about that. So in January, the board will need to have a discussion and talk about the class size recommendations. And currently these are our class size recommendations from K through 5th grade. Administration is recommending non-resident enrollment be capped when student enrollment reaches the top end of the school board recommended class size. This does not mean that we won't go over the school board recommended class size like we did this year in some classes because we can't predict resident enrollment, but we want to be able to say that if in any grade level as stated up there, if we reach the top level of the board recommended class size, that we close to non-resident students at those grade levels. So the way that would look next year is on the next slide. So for this year, that means in kindergarten, we would be closed to open enrollment. In 1st grade, 2nd grade. This year, 3rd grade would remain open, 4th and 5th would remain open based on recommended class sizes. For next year, because we have that exceptional bubble in 2nd grade, we would be closed at the 3rd grade level as well. So this is general education students who open enroll to our district. If we are already at or above the board recommended class size, the administration is recommending that we close to non-resident students so that we can accommodate any potential move-ins of our own residents. In terms of cross-categorical programming, I did the same kind of workload analysis that I've done in previous years. And in 4K special education, it's an inclusionary model. We generally have about 15 students in that program. Some of them are gen ed, some of them are special ed, just like our play groups. Currently, we have about 7 students that are special ed in that program, and the class sizes are upwards of 15. So we are recommending that be closed for next year as well. K through 3, right now the average workload is as stated above, not yet at the max. So K through 3, we would remain open to open enrollment students who might have IEPs as long as they don't have a service that's unavailable. In grades 4 and 5, likewise, we would remain open to open enrollment. Middle school, open. High school, they are at or above recommended workload capacity right right now, and they're currently not fully staffed for paraprofessionals. So we're recommending that we remain closed for next year due to numbers and staffing shortages. Then the next slide talks about our specialized programs.
And just any questions about kind of this proposal with regards to what we'd be coming back in January for board action?
So in January, is the board action to agree to the recommendations? Okay. One question I would have is, and I don't know, it's not like I'm opposed to it or not, but there is a contradiction of us wanting more enrollment because it goes for money into our budget and all of that stuff, and then also capping sections. And so that's something I guess I would want to consider is how long does our students that open enroll in our district, do they tend to stay with us for more than 1 year? Do they, I know many kids that go back and forth, like what does that look like for us here? Because especially with like slide 8 where we're looking at like closing it with kindergarten 21 kids, like if we can recoup 1 or 2 kids that aren't taking services, because I totally understand the special ed where we're starting to have to hire people, but I question a little bit the other side, and it's just because of the balance of can we capture more enrollment overall. So that's just something to think.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it to you guys this month, because this is something that we haven't talked about, at least in the last 3 years that I've been here, and it is something that right now, so if we don't talk about it, then it's wide open.
Yeah.
So it's up to the board to make that decision.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think, and that's going to be the trade-off, right, is you would then have to, when you make a decision to keep it open, then you'll have class sizes that potentially could be at the higher end, and then...
Especially for that year, and then we right-size it for the next year because of staffing.
Right?
If you can,
it's, it's a $80,000 to $90,000 to add a staff member, right? And you're receiving $11,000, right? So those are some of the challenges and trade-offs. And again, this does not mean that any students within the Prescott school boundaries wouldn't push us above. It's just that you wouldn't be accepting people from an external district. Okay.
So then for the specialized programs, something that I also learned is that for 3-year-olds or like our play group, that preschool age, we're also not required to take those students because each school district is required to serve their own 3-year-old population. But I did, just for posterity's sake, put that on here as well. We do periodically get requests for people who work in Prescott, whose kids go to our local daycares. They want their 3-year-olds evaluated and then served by the Prescott School District at the daycare. And that becomes really dicey because really we don't send all of our related services providers, we don't send them all to the daycares. We send speech, and we don't have a special ed teacher at all of our daycares. So we're just, for that reason, we're going to recommend that remain closed to non-residents. At the elementary level, in our specialized program at the elementary, we currently have about a workload of about 11.9 high needs students with behavioral challenges, so they're already over capacity in terms of the workload. At the middle school, currently we are at a workload of 6, so well below that 9. At the middle school, we would remain open for, that is our high needs programming, primarily for students on the autism spectrum and intellectual disabilities. And then at the high school, we continue to have the same issue that we've had previously. We're kind of right on the money in terms of workload, but we continue to lag in terms of retaining qualified paraprofessional staff that can really run the program effectively. So. All right, so in summary, in January, the recommendation is to say that 4K would be closed to non-residents, K through 5 would be open for special education pending however you guys decide on class size thresholds. If you don't want to set a threshold just because of the open enrollment piece and finance generation, then perhaps we don't even address it in the motion in January. Middle school would remain open, including specialized programming, and the high school would remain closed due to workload numbers, staffing, and specialized programming.
Back to the previous slide.
Yep.
So you're over in elementary, and you're under in middle school, how are we addressing the elementary programming with those high needs students at this point if we're over? Is it over? Is it putting stress on the teachers that are doing that right now? And is there a way to, since I know nothing about all of this special ed situation, is there a way to get middle school to assist with elementary to balance?
Yeah, that
the
would
workload?
be tricky. And the way the numbers are working is, so what you do to calculate the workload is you take the total number of minutes that a child requires during the day. You also add up the total number of minutes the teacher would be spending in IEP meetings during the year, and then the total number of minutes that they would be spending in evaluation for students during the year. And I calculate that down to a daily minute total and divide that by the total number of available minutes, subtracting lunch and things like that. And then I add that to the actual caseload number. So that teacher at the elementary, her caseload is actually around 7 or 8, but then when you add the service minutes, it brings it up above that number. So right now, it's working fine because the elementary is also well-staffed with paraprofessionals. So they have the staffing generally they need to be able to serve all of the minutes in the IEPs. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if we were in a position where we weren't able to serve the service minutes or meet the needs of the students, then we would have to look at considering additional staffing.
I was going to just add that what's unique about, these are high needs programs, yeah, is that they are with their high needs teachers really consistently throughout the day. So it's not like you can kind of weed an hour or two out that you can go. Yeah, that's unique to this group of students compared to other special ed kids.
Yeah, and at the middle school, they started with more students, but we had a kid who was really high needs move out mid-fall. They moved to Rochester. And so that's why that workload is lower. But we also now have a student that has been showing some significant aggression. And so they deal with a lot more unique needs where we wouldn't really be able to share, and we're understaffed at the middle school in terms of paraprofessional staffing. So it's not as simple as kind of shifting staff around either. Yeah.
Clarify high needs, because do you mean like intellectual students that have intellectual disabilities, or do you mean like they just have high numbers on their IEPs?
Yep, so in the companion document that has been shared with you, it defines what specialized programming means, and it generally means programs where students are spending 50% or more of their day in the special ed program. We're not talking specifically about disabilities or that sort of thing, but we all know that there are certain disability labels that tend to require more intensive programming, but we don't define those programs by those disabilities.
Sure. The other question would be, what are, like, I would be interested to know that, like, what our surrounding areas are for, like, are they this high as well for their, because
Not everybody uses a workload model, so it would be comparing apples to oranges. I could ask what their straight up special ed numbers are, and I could provide that to you guys in January possibly. Do you want me to do that?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. You bet. Because that would be an interesting comparison. Yeah. So then the next the next slide just is the last slide, and then the grade level considerations, including board recommendations for class size, if we want to even incorporate that as part of our discussion.
And to be clear, the board does have to make a decision in January, and then it gets publicly posted both and reported to DPI. So it is an action item, so anything that any information or clarification clarification you need, we need to know ahead of January 15th.
And the feedback that I've been getting from legal counsel, from the trainings that I've attended, is when an open enrollment decision is appealed to DPI, the appeal usually falls against the district only when the district fails to follow their process.
Okay.
So our process is, if we get an open enrollment and the student has an IEP, we automatically review that IEP for whether or not we have the available service, and then we respond back based on that. So we do have a very kind of well laid out process for considering open enrollments.
And capping the class size of regular students for elementary, we know that this year, I know when we started this school year, that Sarah came back to us and said, there's a few more second graders than what she had thought that were in our district. So we know that can happen. So we know we need to hold on, if we're gonna go over those numbers, that there are students in our district that we're saving those spots for, or putting at least, the extra pressure or burden on teachers for students in our district. Okay.
I think an added piece to this is when we were looking, gosh, was it over the summer maybe, or the end of last school year, when we were looking and considering what class sizes would look like this coming year, we knew and recognized that we might be over the board recommendation in many cases. And we had talked about it, and we haven't since brought it back up, but it might be that we need to adjust our board recommendation class sizes too. It's been a long time since we've looked at that, and we're currently not in line with it. So I think it's something worth looking at again. And I know that a lot has to do with like the classroom sizes, even the square footage and all that kind of stuff, but it might be something we want to touch base on, which would impact that as well.
And I'm certainly not the expert on general ed class sizes. That would be my colleagues.
Well, I wonder if that's something class size-wise that we look at as far as, the future planning down the road, how we look at and adjust every year as needed.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments? I think we're good here.
Nope, I'm done.
Thanks. I'll make a
Sandy,
motion.
thank you. Thanks, Sandy. Let's move on. Item B, teaching and learning update. Waiting in the wings for hours. Michael Kozmowski.
Good morning, Gordon. Thanks, Ryan.
Good morning.
There's because are you going to pull that up?
I'm trying. I'm catching up. Need some Jeopardy music going.
No, we can't have nice things.
We have nice things.
Let's see if it connected here. Doesn't look like it wanted to. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Is it you and me? All right. Two topics to address tonight. One is the ever-coveted academic calendar for next year, and then something in regards to our health curriculum. So first thing I just want to talk about briefly, I briefly mentioned to the board last month when I was here about our calendar, some of the unique things coming to this next year's calendar. It actually is very similar to this year's calendar, the way it sets up. The only difference is this year, after winter break, you have that Thursday, Friday that some schools are coming back in session for January 2nd and 3rd. We chose not to do that. Next year, that 2-day is actually on the front side of the winter break. So some schools will consider, are you going to go to school that 22nd, 23rd? Based on the survey that we gave last year to our staff, 70% of the staff preferred that full 2-week winter break, and that was with it on the backside. I'm sure if we surveyed again, it probably would be higher with it on the front side. So with that, and then all those other priorities that we talked about last week, a few just emerging different calendars came forward. So one is just a repeat of this school year. So the one on the left, you can see we have our blue is the return to learn days. Those are those 3 days in the summer that are ramp up to learning. They count as summer school enrollment for us, which really impacts our FTE for our funding. Also unique is state statute says September 1st, and this year September 1st happens to be the Monday of Labor Day, so September 2nd would be our starting date there. You can see these red squares that show up, and those are just indicating for 4K. If there's a Monday where we have off, 4K would turn on Friday. Otherwise, our 4K program is a Monday through Thursday program, but on those days, in order to meet our requirement hours, we do turn those on. We're just indicating them on this calendar so it's clear to 4K families. Ms. Duzick does indicate and send that to them, but then they get a unique calendar, so we decided to just put it on this year. We aligned our professional development days, the one to the MEA weekend, along with that day off after parent-teacher conference week. We have trimester alignments for our PD days because at the high school level, we truly do have new classes that are turning on. So that gives those teachers an opportunity to at least flip their classrooms around, pull out materials, things like that. You can see the repeat calendar has the built-in full 2 weeks, 3 weekends as well. The March PD day, or spring break aligns to UW River Falls. They have theirs posted for the next several years. It's kind of nice to see that because then we can align to our neighbors. Other than that, just like this year, we have 2 days after in June that are student contact days, and then 1 day for teacher workshop at the end of the year. And then we have our tentative summer school on there as well, the 3 weeks that we offer busing. We do summer school throughout the entire summer. These are just the 3 weeks that we offer busing to that summer school. And again, those are tentative. Some of it depends on, we know that we have some professional development on that 10th, so we might look at, is that the true day that we want to start? Do we want to start at a different time? Things like that. The only other, the big question that comes up that now that people see the calendar, they're starting to live through it, is there the gap between our professional development day in January and our professional development day in March. February, even though it's the shortest calendar month, is the longest month of the year. So would we want to consider President's Day, aligning a day off with President's Day? Again, there would be that. The benefit of aligning with President's Day is that there's going to be families that already would have the day off for work and things like that it would cause less of a hardship on our families, would give a little relief to our staff and to families as well. All it would do is slide back the end of the school year by 1 day, which again would maintain that gap for summer school, which our summer school teachers hold dearly, that break in between the end of the school year and the start of summer school. So those really are the two sort of options for the board. If you guys have any feedback from me, I did share this with Principal McGee. He looked at it. He said, yes, everything is, they had very positive about this calendar and the way that it's gone. They really like this calendar this year. He understood that, the 1 day here or there might change, but other than that, he really didn't have any feedback on the calendar itself. So if the board has some feedback, I'll take it.
Anybody? Helen, do you have any feedback here?
No, I don't have any feedback. I just need to figure out if my spring break line.
First of all,
I do believe River Falls School District does align to UW River Falls,
Okay.
and that is
Then
the
we're
UW
good.
River Falls.
I think it looks fabulous. The February, the February day might be nice. It's nice. It's a long month, but yeah.
It's the longest, shortest month of the year.
Longest, shortest month.
Vicki?
I guess I am going to you for whatever it is that you recommend and whatever your teachers recommend. I don't know, it's 1 day that looks like, yep, that's a long time without. Do you want to be out sooner at the end? It's 1 day. It's not a whole week. So, I mean, if President's Day is a good day to have off, I guess if that's what works, it works.
Yeah, I work in schools, and February is a long month, and so I lean towards the day off in February. So, but I could be persuaded either way easily. Did you ask teachers which one they preferred? If they preferred that President's Day or not? Or not just teachers, but staff?
In generals, we did. So in the years past, you've directed me now after this board meeting.
Yeah.
Send the options.
Yeah.
Send an input survey. Again, this was something that got wiped away in Act 10. This was negotiable
Sure.
at one point. It's
Yeah.
now not.
Yep.
So as an advisory, I can get you that information if
Yeah.
you'd like from staff
Yeah.
of which way they're leaning.
Yeah, they could
to help
put
you with
both
your
of those
decision.
up and I'd be happy with either one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it does not align with my spring break, which I actually like because I've gotten accustomed to having a week off with kids learning at school.
Pat, anything here?
No comments. I saw thumbs up that it sounds like there's some passion about what people, so let's ask for their,
Yeah,
and
I'm good with that.
go with their
Thanks,
recommendation.
Michael.
All right, next topic. Human growth and development. So over the last 2 years, we've had our Phi-Ed and health standards have been reviewed by our PLC. We're in the process of looking at curriculum and a curriculum review and adoption process. We have board policy on human growth and development specifically within our health policy. So this is part of that policy, is that there should be a citizens advisory committee, should establish, again, they work in advisory. It tells us the different participants that should be on that board. Their role is to advise the teaching and learning department and then basically report back to the board about that curriculum. We inquired with legal counsel, and they have advised us that in the state statute, which we have to align to, it talks about what percent or, of that committee can be made up of those different groups, but that the committee needs to be, and it's very hard to read because of the coloring here, but the school board shall appoint an ad hoc committee is what it says in the statute, and our legal is advising us that that means you must formally form this advisory committee. So, that's our next step in this process. We've got the curriculum. Our teachers have taken the time this fall to write the curriculum. Right now, we are using the new curriculum that we're leaning towards. We're piloting it in our classes, but when we're doing the human growth and development units, we are still using our old curriculum because, again, this advisory committee has not reviewed any of the new stuff yet. We're now at a point where our health teachers feel comfortable. They've gone through our policy, because our policy then talks about medically accurate information. It talks about certain things that we must cover, including abstinence and things like that. So they're going through, they're checking off that list, they're making sure that they're hitting all the things that our policy says we need to hit as well. So they are ready to go. It's just how fast is the board ready to go? So there's two different options here that I just want some input from the board. I know our health teachers will say either one, they can make it work. Just how quickly do we want to get to this, or do we need to get to this? Right now, health is offered, it was offered trimester 1 at the high school. It will not be offered again until trimester 3. It is every quarter, though, at our middle school. As we started this process in the fall, we thought we could expedite it. Now knowing we have to have an appointed, not just an invited group, the health teachers know that this probably will not be in place this school year. It will be for next school year. Yeah. So even if this is one of these, the first one's a pretty accelerated one, that right after winter break, we would invite families, we would invite the community to fill out a survey on their interest to be on this advisory committee, depending on how much interest we get for that. I know when I first started in teaching and learning, I did the exact same thing for all curriculum advisory, and I got one person from the community that was interested to fill out the survey. We also do have some families, though, that as I've talked with families and they've questioned things, like I've invited some of them that when this comes out, I will invite you to fill this out. The other one is just a little bit longer of a process, so that one would be right after winter break. They'd have basically a week to apply for it, and then all ready on January 15th. You would have that list to either approve or move down the road if you wanted to move it into February, and then, or do we want to take a little bit longer, go out after winter break, approximately a month to get it back to us. I could give you an update of where we are and maybe if we need to solicit or bang the drums of making sure people are getting on this committee that are passionate about health and human growth education. And then I'll list to you in February. So I'm just looking for the board's feelings on where you are with all the other things you have going on of reviewing lists and committees and making appointments.
Is there a number that we have to have on this committee?
There's no specific number, but it's certain percentages, or 1/5 can only be, of school employees.
The certain categories, okay.
Yeah, the only category that can be higher than 20% is parents. We can have more than 20% of parents, but we can't have more than 20% of others. So we're going to need to get that. If I have 2 health teachers, 2 out of the 3 that are on the committee, that means I'm going to have a certain number of parents that we have to have on the committee. So we'll have to work maybe, I know we have our parent committees, our advisories already. I don't think parents are going to be the issue. It's going to be more of the community members. Yep. We have to invite the clergy, so we need at least 1 clergy from our community, So
that's where I'm thinking timeline. If we have to make sure we're getting at least 1 person from a certain area, I don't know that we could have that list by February, do you? That seems like pretty quick.
I think the January board meeting would be a push to get that in place. I think the February is probably more doable, but at least by then, we would also know, do we need to move it further down the road?
Push it?
Again, knowing that this isn't probably going to be in place until next fall, it really could be something we could move even further.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, when does it have to happen? Is there?
It just has to happen before we teach using this new resource.
Why don't we just go with the second option here for now?
And if we have to push
it. If we need to push it, we push it. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fine. That's
I think pretty aggressive to get it done by January 10th with the break and everything, right? So
it would be.
Board, anybody have any problem with that?
No, I think it's still aggressive February 19th coming back. So really, it's not till next year, so.
Initially, the health teachers wanted it in place for this year.
I
They really like to be using the full curriculum, but knowing that we're going to do this, we're going to have probably multiple meetings with this committee. We just know it's going to be a little bit slower of a process.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Let's move item C is Chamber of Commerce Educator of the Year nominations.
This is one of the kind of joys of working in education, is to have community partnerships that are willing to recognize kind of the noble profession. We put out a survey both of staff, students, and community members. We're really happy to announce that we had 28 different staff members that were nominated. Our admin team reviewed and has put names forward for each level, including 4K. The Chamber of Commerce is the final decision maker. They received the names last week, and the annual dinner is held on January 15th at 5 p.m. And just before the individual will be announced at the January 15th Chamber of Commerce, along with other citizens that are recognized. Really proud of the participation and very thankful for the input and are sharing the comments out with the staff that were put forward. That's it.
All right. We'll move on to item D then?
Yes.
Rick? Okay. All right. Discussion related on the $1.2 million operating levy funds.
Yeah, so this one, I think it's unfortunate that some of the individuals that came in and spoke aren't here. Luckily, we do tape, and this will be posted. I think one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of people have beliefs, and a lot of people have opinions. But the difficulty is they're not facts. And the board has been factual in every step of the way, has been more transparent than many other districts districts as well as different organizations within our community. Tonight, I've asked, because I think it is straightforward, it gives the ability for the board to put information out into the community, to clarify the rumors and the misinformation, and to allow us to move forward and focus on 2035, which is what this next decade of Prescott Public Schools will look like. So Mike Matzik is going to walk you through. We have 5 slides and personal information that we'll be looking at individuals from the board's own tax statements, that they're willing to be that vulnerable to share that with you. I'll start, and the first piece is very important for people to understand, is that we have, by law, in statute, must always describe information about equalized value, also known as fair market value. That appears on everybody's tax statement that comes out in December. School districts do not have individual access to assess values. We have 5 municipalities. All 5 of them assess at different times. All 5 of them are on different cycles. And in addition, the ratio of an assessed property to its equalized property is never 1. It's correlated, but it's not 1. And the Department of Revenue requires schools to report out to the county and to the Department of Revenue equalized value. Equalized value is reported on an annual basis in July and then finalized and also imparted to the district on October 15th when the board identifies how much it's going to ask the community through its levy for the amount that is required to operate our facilities and pay our teachers and run our schools. So when you put that in place, understand that the 5 municipalities alphabetically listed, except for City of Prescott is at the bottom here. It talks about how much, because Prescott is the only geographic area that has a TID, tax increment district, and that, therefore all of the scenarios we talk about will be unique there. But when the district chose, as a school board, to levy just shy of 11.5 million, you don't take the 11.5 million and divide it equally among the 5 municipalities. You base it on the value of the properties within those areas. So when the tax statements go out from the finance department after the October meeting, before November 20th, after November 5th election, this is the ratio. Prescott, the city, pays 40.5% of whatever you levy on an annual basis. This appropriation varies each year based on the property from column 2. Trumbull pays just under 2% of the grand total. Oak Grove pays 35%, Diamond Bluff pays 3%, and Clifton pays 19.5%. So out of the 11.5, it's going to divide up across, and that's the piece of the pie that they pay. Equalized values did increase across the 5 areas by 10%. The average, if I said a pool is 5 feet on average, people are surprised that you drown in a 2-foot area, right? It has a shallow, middle, and deep end. You can see that Clifton equalized value went up by 7.5 and Trumbull went up by 12.5. That's the scenario that the board has to play with as it then gives out the tax statements. I'm going to turn it over to our president, Mike Matzik, to walk you through the rest of the scenarios.
How does this thing work?
It's magic. Let's see, fire this up. Can you see the green dot?
Yeah, which button is it?
Right there. The one that looks like an eye.
All right, are we going to go through this one too?
Just this one real quick.
Well, you were going to go through this one.
All right, so on the left-hand side, 23-24, the school board levied $10.3 million. The overall equalized value of all 5 municipalities was $1.3 billion. That's how we get the mill rate. The mill rate was described last year at 7.70. That's per thousand, right? The mill rate for this year, we levied, the school board, just under 11.5. The equalized value increased by $100 million to $1.4 billion. The equalized mill rate went up to 7.7. That means the difference, it's standardized, is 0.07. Okay? You look at the appropriations for 23-24, you can see what the appropriations then were for 24-25, the third column, and then what is the difference. You can see that the appropriation, how much of the value changed of what they're covering it ranged from 15% at Trimble to just under 8% for Clifton. Okay?
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody knows, but property tax statements came out last week. Obviously, what I tried to illustrate here is I took some actual property tax statements because we're trying to break it down and show how two formulas can come to the same conclusion. And I'm going to start with down in the red because that represents the Prescott calculation, the PSD calculation down here. We calculate based on equalized value or the estimated fair market value. So if in this example, it's a $327,000 house, and if you see this is the mill rate, the Prescott mill rate that we have been communicating since the final mill rate was set, and I believe that was after what, October 15th? Correct. That we finally got the last piece of information that sets that mill rate. And remind me what information came in on that date. Was that?
So we got equalization, the final equalization aid dropped by 100,000, played out with this, but that mill rate then is fixed based on what you levied.
So up until that point, this changed a little bit here and there, and therefore I know there was some discussion last month about, the mill rate was changing, and we didn't do a very good job communicating that out. I acknowledge that, but our final mill rate that was published on October 15th, and it stayed the same, is right here, and it's based on, it's used in this formula to calculate the property taxes. Okay, so fair market value times the mill rate, and then there's this school levy tax credit line. Rick, this is the tax, I don't know if it's a refund, but it's the state dollars, right?
Yeah, so the Wisconsin legislature allocates a certain amount of money and divvies it up across the 5 communities, and then it's correlated with the price of your property. The higher priced your property, the more you'll get in a school levy tax credit. It does change on an annual basis, but it is subtracted from your overall amount, and then that is what is going to be that $2,037 rate.
Right, so this formula uses our mill rate. This is what we've been communicating. Oak Grove has a township mill rate because they use a different number. They use assessed value. Assessed value also is on the property statement here, property tax statement here. Same school levy tax credit gets applied, and both get to the same number. So it's two different formulas that ultimately get to the same number. And really what I want to hit here is it doesn't matter what formula you use, you're still paying the same amount. Okay, so Oak Grove has their way of doing it, Prescott has their way, all the townships have their way of calculating because they're using assessed value. We, by law, as Rick said, have to use equalized or fair market value. So that's what, hopefully this makes sense.
Yeah, so just to remind people, Department of Revenue, DPI, require us, and so does statute, to use fair market value. We use it on an annual basis, and it is updated That's where equalized part comes from the Department of Revenue, and reported out to districts and statewide to each municipality. So that's what we do. It ultimately then gets translated at each municipality, township, village on assessed values. But as Mike is saying, whether or not you use the mill rate and fair market value or assessed and the mill rate from the township, you still pay the same amount.
And before you move to the next slide, Rick, so this should apply for all the townships that neighbor Prescott. So Prescott's a little different, but all the townships, you can kind of figure this out and backdoor into your, how they come up with that final school tax levy. I wanted to bring this slide in just for reference, because this is the document that kind of, well, it started everything. So like this is the number that I want to talk about, this 5188, because if you remember when we certified our school district levy over here, we certified at 4.6 million. That's what we certified.
For the city of Prescott.
For the city of Prescott. That's what we submitted to DPI. The reason that number is higher is because of a TID increment that the city adds onto that, and that's what makes up that $5,188,000 number there. I want to be really clear that maybe I'll get into that on the next slide about the TID, because I think it's really important to hit on. That's a really good tool for the city to use, and I'll show the next tax slide. But okay, so we just keep this in mind that we have a mill rate here of about 0.00828 from and that's the city's mill rate, not the school district mill rate on assessed value.
So again, it's not that their calculation is wrong. It's not that their mill rate is wrong. It's their mill rate on assessed value. Our mill rate is on fair market value. They're the same for the equation, and it'll give you the same information. It's just that that's what townships and municipalities and villages do. They work in assessed. We're required to work in fair market value.
Okay, so here's Prescott, and it's very similar to the others, but because of the TID, it's a little bit more nuanced. So starting again down here, again, we're fair market value, so this house is 528, and the mill rate, again, it's the Prescott School District mill rate. That's the one we talked about, that we communicated out. School levy tax credit, all that gets factored in here. The difference is the TID. And the TID funds, again, I just want to point this out, that these are funds that are collected and retained by the city. And I'll stop right there, I'll pause right there, because I want to call it that I think a TID is a good thing. I'm not trying to post any shade on TIDs, because the TID, it's a great tool for the city to help further development of city projects and bring industry in, and it makes Prescott better. And I'll be honest, I'll be happy to pay $93. It's $8 or $9 a month. I'm glad to pay that to help support the city of Prescott. So I want to be really clear that that's not the purpose of why we're calling it out, but it did cause a lot of confusion in how the taxes are calculated for Prescott in particular.
And two things. The TID helps the diversity of the tax base. That's a great thing. People were focused on the mill rates, and they're both highlighted, but it's just a simple math problem. And so both will get you the same answer. It's not to focus on the mill rate.
So you can see, again, it's assessed value over the city mill rate, and then the same school levy tax credit gets applied. And if you do the math, if you get the calculator out, you'll know that this is exactly the same. Now, I'm just going to point this out, that I kind of backdoored into the TID, but we talked to Baird about this as well as the Department of Revenue, and got the numbers, and this is all verified from Baird and the Department of Revenue. So these numbers that we're showing are not something that we made up. I worked on it, but we did get confirmation, and this is pretty much spot on with how your tax bill is calculated.
And a couple things, right, is that this is a sequential kind of a bunch of dominoes. The city can't finalize their mill rate until we certify our levy. And because we had an operational levy that voters were voting on November 5th, we couldn't even give information to the city of Prescott until after November 5th, that the election was certified, and then they could move forward. Also, the TID increment of how much they're going to add on varies on an annual basis. So there's no way for Prescott Public Schools to know prior to November 5th to be able to tell you what's going to be added on to that portion.
I wanted to try to illustrate an exercise here. Like if the fair market value were to stay the same across years, between these last 2 years, and what I'm trying to articulate here is the difference in the school district portion of property taxes. So if that same property tax statement from this year had the same fair market value last year, and you apply last year's school district mill rate, this is the actual school levy tax credit from last year's property tax statement, and approximately how much the TID would have cost. The TID was on last year's. It's been on our tax statements for as long as they've been using them, and it's just been. It hasn't been questioned, so I'm trying to help understand it myself and try to articulate it as well. So as a disclaimer, though, these numbers I took them from the 2023 property tax statement. So these might vary a little bit. If you take the 497 fair market value, if it was actually 528, I think the school levy tax credit would actually be higher because it's a higher value, but then this would also be higher with the TID. So the point of the exercise is that if you look at this particular example, give or take a few dollars, our school levy, our school taxes actually go down. And we did many examples of this across Oak Grove, Clifton, Diamond Bluff, where if you keep the fair market value constant and apply the rest of the formula that calculates taxes, it illustrates that the tax impact on the referendum was not as much as I guess you would think.
There's a lot of variables,
there's
and
variables.
And they go up and down.
Thank you.
But you have to fix something, right? And so what you're trying to do is compare apples to apples, value at 400,000 year one, 400,000 year two, times a mill rate that changed. Right? And that's what ultimately is the standardized way. We do know that assessed values go up and down based on the economy. In 2008, assessed values went down when we had implosion of property values, and now they're going up. So when it goes down or it goes up, what doesn't change is what the school board levies and what proportion each of the 5 municipalities or city are going to pay. And so you have to kind of keep one thing stable and say what's varying, it's the amount that you've levied, and what is that impact.
So, I think we covered everything on this, but I just want to hit the points that we just covered. There's 2 different methods to calculate the school portion of taxes, and that's assessed versus fair market. Both methods are correct, and you do get to the same amount. And you can take your own property tax statement and do the same exact exercise that I just showed, and you'll get the same numbers. Especially, you'll get almost identical numbers if you're not a Prescott resident, but you can kind of backdoor into what the TID, how the TID impacts your taxes as well. Anything else, Rick? I just want to make sure we covered the marketing materials we had on post October 15th were accurate. And I think the point is that when assessments go up, when home values go up, your property taxes are going to go up. And we don't have information to really, we're going to go here.
This is all the different calculations by area.
We're not going to walk through.
We're not going to walk through, but it's available. We'll send it to you. But if you follow President Matzik's calculations, you can kind of put in whether or not you're in Oak Grove, Clifton, and see what the impact impact is using the two different mill rates.
Yeah.
And what we don't have, obviously, until December is how the assessed values change for each address or mailbox. And so you can see at Clifton, where a house in 2023, it went up $28,000. It's a 6% increase. It's lower than the 8% for overall. So some houses are going up, some houses are going down. Here's the overall calculation between year one, year two, keeping the fair market value constant.
Maybe go back to... So, where am I here? I'm just going to summarize this up here really quick. I know we're 3 hours into a meeting here, but we've spent a ton of time on this over the last 6 weeks since the referendum passed, and this started becoming a topic of discussion. Taken a lot of heat. There's been a lot of stones casted at the board, and I felt as the board chair that it was necessary tonight to defend the integrity and character of the board. I think our character and integrity has been challenged and attacked, and I think for me it gets personal. I'm not going to speak for the other board members, but I take it personal every time we get attacked. I'm not saying that there's things that we shouldn't do, can do better. Can we do better? Absolutely. I think there's things that we should be looking at down the road that we can maybe incorporate some of the findings that we found tonight. Yes, we can do better, but I think there's a flip side too. There's when you have an individual or individuals that take a document from a work in progress document, and they don't ask any questions. They don't go to the source of the document to ask questions. They don't do any fact checking. It gets posted on Facebook, and for the whole world to comment on it and make their own assumptions. And I'm trying to be respectful here, but I believe that is completely irresponsible and it's divisive, all right? If you have a question, ask the source or come to somebody that can help get you that answer, all right? And it's irresponsible, it's kind of lazy, all right? I don't know how else to put it. So I think the shoe goes on either foot. It goes both ways. Yes, we can do better, but I also think when things like this get posted on Facebook and we have to react to information that we have never had to do this before. In the 15 years I've been on the board, we've passed, I don't know, 4 referendums, 5, never got to this level of detail. And before that even, we've never had to figure out how to calculate assessed value to show something like this. I'm not saying this is not warranted. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad I did it. I personally am more knowledgeable because I took the time to do it. But this whole situation, I think, could have been better handled on both sides of the argument. That's all I'm trying to say. I do want to open it up here and ask the board if there's any comments or questions that you have about this, or just in general reflecting on these last 6 weeks, because I know it's been a toll on all of us. Any comments or thoughts here? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
It says Mike Matzik last word.
Yeah.
I would just say one of the things, a learning for me through all of this is we have never talked about TIDs, districts, on the school portion. I didn't even know that was on our school portion. I don't know where it's called out in the tax statement that it's on our school portion. And so I think that's just something that moving forward, when we talk about the school portion, we just have to include that there's a TID amount on there. And we can't predict it, we don't know what it is, we don't decide it, but that's something that I think throws those numbers off when people are looking at it. So that's something, for me, that's been a big takeaway of something we can do better.
Great.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Anybody else? I don't want to put you on the spot. I just
No,
want
you
to
did a
give you the
great job.
opportunity to talk.
You did a good job, Mike. Again, it's disappointing that that some of the people didn't stick around to hear this and see this, and it seems to be some of the same people that will bring up additional questions, and they'll call out whatever, lack of visibility and lack of integrity, and that's just too bad. The silver lining in this process, though, is I think the incredible amount of effort that is put into this will pay dividends in the future. I think that we've probably developed some best practices going forward of things that we can share in the annual meeting that have never been shared before, but why not now? And if a referendum ever comes up, we'll be better prepared to communicate, hopefully more effectively. So.
Well, yeah, I learned a lot on how my tax statement reads. I never would have gone into this detail before. You just look at what the total due is and you just go with that. Understanding better how all the numbers are, how we arrive at all the numbers, all of that sort of thing. I guess the biggest thing for me, some of the takeaways is that I've looked at some of this, the Department of Revenue information on how all of the property values and taxes are done for the state, and how each county is responsible in each township and all of that. And there's timelines, but there's really not hard and fast timelines as far as when fair market value or not a value, but assessments are going to be done and when that's going to be applied, and everybody has their own timetable and time framing on how they do that in each different municipality. So it's definitely a learning experience, I think, for all of us. But I think the biggest result that I got when I did some of these calculations is our average that we thought we would see is really the average. If we look at it, Prescott went down, some of us went up a little, but we didn't, as far as what that difference is in those mill rates and that fixed value, it's not this huge amount that it looks like on your taxes. The reason your tax statement has gone up is your value on your home has gone up. And that's where the bulk of my tax increase came from, was because the value on my property went up this year.
I'm not going to reiterate anything that was said up here beside the fact that Facebook needs to not be where you go to get your information. If you have a question, ask us, come to the meetings, have a conversation. We are all human. Assume best intentions until proven otherwise. I have children that read Facebook and that send me messages, and now they're worried about their mother. So that's a problem. I've been here the least amount of time, and whether I agree or disagree with things that are said, I respect everyone up here, and I'm sorry, but we're the 5 that ran. If you think you can do a better job, which you maybe can, I'm up in 2 years. Come for my seat, because my family is worth more than the stress this is causing. Ask questions. Don't just post stuff on Facebook. We're all open for conversations. Most of you out there know where I live. Please don't come to my house, but you now know where I work. It's too much. Facebook's the new Wikipedia. Anything on there, whether you can prove it or whether you think it's true or not, fact check. nothing, I can't say it, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. We need to start assuming best intentions. And if you disagree, that's okay, because there's a lot of things that I disagree with, and I have conversations about them. But we're human. That's it.
Before we wrap it up, there was a public comment made in the early part of the meeting about Baird, and there's some information thrown at us. Baird has been a partner for Prescott at least as long as I've been here, and it's probably been over 20 years. I'd have to go back and fact check that, but it's been on the board. Baird is one of the most prestigious financial institutions, and they cover at least 80% of the districts in the state of Wisconsin. Okay, so I take a little bit of issue with just throwing out a comment and trying to throw Baird under the bus a little bit, because they've been great. They've given us so much of their time over the last 6 weeks. Rick and I have been meeting with Baird more than I meet with you guys, just to get our facts and our numbers right. And people don't like the fact that we can't get information out as fast as it gets on social media and some of the other platforms. We have to do fact checks. We have to check every single number before we present it and before we show it to people, because we're held to that standard. People can throw stuff anywhere they want, and they're not held to any standard. There's no accountability anywhere. We have accountability. So that's why it takes the school district time before we can appropriate a response. Okay, so I'll end with this. At a board level, we're done addressing this issue. I'm closing the book on it and we're moving on. If there's issues next year when we want to talk about at the annual meeting about property taxes, I think we got some new tools that we might want to look at. I think there's a lot of positives that came out of this exercise, and I'm absolutely open to working with the city to help paint a picture in Prescott for what property tax impacts looks like moving forward. Absolutely, I think that's something we got to get better at. Both institutions need to work together, and I think that's what you guys are all looking for. So, all right, let's move on. That was fun. All right.
I told you could do it.
Yeah.
It's real fun.
Item E, Vision 2030.
Well, no, we got just three quick
You're
things.
right. We got to talk about salary comp. The whole thing that.
Well, it's just, these will be really quick, right? We made mid-year raises based on a board action earlier. We're not done, but we need to be able to use the tools that we have, and they've been updated. Finance department will continue to work. We'll come back to you. We are going to start building the fiscal year 25-26 based on the assumptions that we worked on the 11th. Everything is based on assumptions and based on what we know at the time. We know what our healthcare is going to be capped at, 12% increase. We are betting on $325 per pupil. If the Supreme Court overrules it, we got to change that estimate. But we can only go on what we have at this time. Secondly, we have a cohort of staff that participated in PBG process. So they had, we know that based on the 11th you had asked us to look at, we believe that there are 14 Prescott staff, 9 who went through a one-year cycle, or I'm sorry, a one cycle for relicensure. Relicensure is a 5-year process. We believe that there are 3 that went through 2 years. So overall, we'll be coming back and meeting with those PPG staff members. It'll be HR and teaching and learning to talk about options for compensation, because we are based on credits, and those individuals did not have to have college credits to receive relicensure. Secondly, we have met and reached out with Tracy Budworth, and on January 9th, we'll be meeting with representatives of each school level and start looking at what are some shared interests with regards to future areas of strengthening both the work environment, pay, and compensation. And I'll be reaching out to Tracy to find out what your kind of other interests might be, so when we have that meeting on the 9th. Finally, we need our community to engage and talk to the legislature. In January, they gavel back in. Special education, we continue to talk about it. It is important. Right now, we get funded 30 cents on the dollar. It also is fixed. We're asking for our legislators to give 60% year one in the next biennium, 60% in the next, and make it fund sufficient. What happens right now is when districts draw down the amount of money, we started at above 30%, and it's now at 28% because the funds were fixed. Those are the things that we'll continue to advocate on behalf of our students, advocate on behalf of our staff, and obviously for the Prescott Public Schools greater community. Now we go to E.
Well, I guess, yeah, we're doing it. Nobody has any comments or questions on that one. Should we just move on?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll go to item E, Vision 2035. And the last item, for those wondering. We used to start these meetings at 7, so it'd be 10:15.
Yeah, those were tough days.
Yeah.
You guys have fun. Bye,
See
Tracy.
you. We missed you.
All right, so Vision 2035, we also made statements during the process running up to November 5th that we would globally look at what is the future of Prescott Public Schools going to look like. We were in survival mode. We had kicked off with our staff and students to look at our instructional learning areas, making sure that they were right size, we had the right kids in the right places. The bond referendum allowed us to fix up our buildings so that we have the middle school at 1220 serving our students currently 6 through 8. We have students at 125 Elm. We have 2 grade levels there. What you can see is that we staff based on head count. That impacts staffing. But in addition, we are funded based on a 3-year rolling average. And one of the challenges that we're going to have here is that the number of students that are enrolled in 2012, 2013, we had 1,354 students. We are projecting additional drop, but you can see we peaked 1 year after opening the high school of 1,408 students that we were funded on, right? This is what we're funded on for 3-year average. It has now decreased to 1,254. We have lost, right, 150 plus students. Multiply that by $11,000. That's a huge revenue drop. We are going to continue to decrease. One of the decisions and discussions for Vision 2035 has to be, how do you maintain 4 facilities for instruction when we have fewer students? It's not necessarily saying you get rid of the facility. It is necessary for PCR. It is used for junior varsity athletics. We currently are leasing out the space for special education and a day treatment program. We have community ed, PCR, and district office that could easily be moved there and not have to pay rent elsewhere. But that takes an engaged community, and we have recommended to the board some companies. We have worked with TeamWorks. We have solicited other districts to find out who they have worked with, and we have provided you with some names. I believe that it's important for our community to be engaged in the conversations that shape the next 10 years of the Prescott Public Schools. How many facilities? How many buses do you need to bus kids to and from school? What's the number that's appropriate within our fleet? And then to be able to move forward with that. Our goal as an administrative team is to at least confirm, and we talked about this on all the way from April through December 11th, is that there is no interest from the board at this time to consolidate the grade levels any sooner than fall 2026. That means that we have time now to engage our community, our teachers, to identify where would we place grades 4 and 5? Do they fit in the current middle school, 1220? The answer is yes. How would they fit? That's where we need people to talk about, but we could not add any square footage and put all the students in these buildings. And what it would mean is when we talked about where do we save money, we are running very thin with regards to food service. We are losing money in food service. It's just like a classroom. We need a teacher at grade 3, whether or not there's 30 kids or 25 kids in the classroom. But when you see this amount of decrease in students and you're still running food service, I still need a cook. Nicole still needs somebody to serve the food, and we still need somebody at the cashier. And right now, we can't raise food prices fast enough to cover those costs. But if we were in 3 buildings, we still have the same amount of staff, and I don't have an administrator making 6 figures running the cashier and not doing other things that are leading the organization. So the only way to do that, though, is through a facilitated, guided engagement. And so I wanted to just share with you that those are the things that we would like you to consider. We've put names forward, and I think some of it would be the timelines and whether or not you would want to interview individuals or have a subset of you kind of talk and reach out to these different companies.
So maybe I'll just jump in here because we talked about this at the workshop, right? And maybe just to summarize that, we agreed as a board that it wouldn't be our best interest to try to accelerate consolidating buildings as early as next year, that it should at least be a conversation that doesn't take action until 2026 at the very earliest, possibly beyond that. We don't know. So that was item number 1, and then item number 2 was we got a couple of companies that we can work with, but did we I felt like we agreed that we were going to at least have the district administration come to us with a recommendation for a company. Did I capture that right? Anybody else hear that wrong?
Yeah. Agreed. And I think maybe what we talked about, though, or maybe this was just what I thought we talked about, is I'd like to see maybe a very short list of 2, but that the administration had gotten us down to, and discuss the ability for us to interview them.
Yeah, that's good clarification. Yep, you're right. So get it down to 2, and then we want to do interviews, an interview with each of them.
Sounds good.
And just to let you know, so we have Teamworks, a group that we have worked with. You have access to the slides. They started with our staff and students in fall 2023. The Howick's associates, or Drew Howick, he is part of Future Search Methodology. He did run Hudson's Community Conversations. Hudson is now also working with CESO out of Minneapolis. We did talk with CISA 11. I go up there once a month, just like Vicki does with the school board. There's the Rust Prairie Consulting Group, also Joan Sternke, who is part of Studer, but also is on her own Leader Excellence. She's a previous superintendent and does a lot of consulting. And then you have worked with Donovan Group through WASB and Crisis Management. So I just wanted to let you know that this is the list. If we are 3 of us will be down at the joint superintendent school board meeting late in January. My recommendation is that's where you will see and be able to meet with other consultants. And my recommendation is to try to bring back to you in February a portfolio of 2 or 3 companies that we vetted and found out that they've worked with other districts and how that's turned out. You have your own experience with Teamworks, and then you can kind of decide how those align as we move forward to Vision 2035.
That's what we talked about.
Should we move on?
Yep.
All right, that is it for information and discussion. We are through the agenda. There's a public comment section here. Same rules apply. If you want to come up and speak, feel free to do so. Anybody care to be recognized at this time? All right. right, you sure? All right, we're moving on. We have to go into closed session. So the board's got to consider a closed session, consider a motion to convene in closed session under the exemptions 1985-1 DCG in room A117 PHS. And this is to, where's the rationale here?
Is it
We got assessments, Rick, and I wish I could read.
No, I'm gonna get.
My eyes are terrible.
Dude, you need reading glasses.
Safety submission assessments and then updated emergency procedure. That doesn't look right.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. So the first part would be.
It's down below
my bad.
tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's just the first one.
All right. So first off, because there has been some confusion and finger pointing about a district or a school board going into closed session. The statutes allow when the privacy or the seriousness of the information would put either student, staff in jeopardy, you have the ability to put that item in closed session. This agenda was published over a week ago. You understand that we, as a district, are required to have safety submissions to the Office of School Safety about where our students go, how we do reunification, how we train our staff, and how it's been evaluated.
Okay.
Yesterday, flags are at half staff because of a school shooting in Madison. To believe that we would have an open session to talk about how students are going to be reunified, what training our staff go through, or what the security measures and how it's been evaluated by professionals and SROs,
Publicly, so others
publicly
can.
makes absolutely no sense. And that, therefore, is why school safety recommendations under open meeting law can move into a closed session to protect our students and to protect the integrity and safety of our staff.
All right. So 1D is the school safety submission. 1G is legal action against a vendor for non-performance, and 1C is to employees, A and B.
Consider employment and promotion and compensation of employee A and employee B.
So we need a motion here.
And a time of reconvening.
Before we make the motion, what do you get, 5 minutes?
10.
10? Okay, so if we go at 9:35?
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
9:35 is good, yeah, compromise.
I move to adjourn into closed session at 9:35 to address the three-sided allowances for private discussion listed above.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? We're going to roll call. Helen?
Aye.
Vicki?
Aye.
Tanya?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. We will go into closed session